we launched shortly after the assassination attempt took place. Our teams are still collecting critical information, speaking to law enforcement, and piecing together the details of this event. This past weekend, a bipartisan team of our investigators, along with key staff from Senators Blumenthal and Senator Johnson's office, traveled to Pennsylvania to speak with local law enforcement officials, review critical information from security officials who were working alongside the Secret Service, and to see the site firsthand. And I want to thank the incredibly brave local law enforcement officers in and around Butler County who responded that afternoon and who met with my staff this past weekend. They have helped to answer tough questions, as well as discuss in detail how the event actually unfolded. I also want to thank the owners of Butler Country Farm Show and the American Glass Research for allowing my staff and law enforcement to walk the grounds and examine the roof of the building the gunman was able to assess. We greatly appreciate your assistance. I've also requested documents along with Senators Paul, Blumenthal, and Johnson related to security preparations, intelligence gathering on potential violence prior to the attack, and detailed explanations of the security response from federal, state, and local authorities. As part of our ongoing investigation, we also seek to speak with additional federal law enforcement personnel, including Secret Service agents who were responsible for securing the event. Today's hearing is an important opportunity to ask critical questions and to begin to give the American people the transparency and the answers that they certainly deserve. There are still many unanswered questions. We need additional information about the Secret Service's advanced planning efforts, the decisions surrounding sniper and counter-sniper team use, placement, and coordination. We also need answers about what appears to be a problematic communication system that limited efforts to relay information and respond to events as they unfolded real time. And while today is focused on asking difficult questions about what went wrong, I also want to thank the men and women of the Secret Service who in an instant will lay their lives on the line to protect our nation's leaders. They have incredibly challenging jobs, and they must continue their mission no matter what our hearing and investigation reveals. I'm also grateful to our Senate Judiciary Committee colleagues for joining us in this important discussion. Given their key role in oversight of both of the agencies represented before us today, and it's very clear that the U.S. Senate is focused on a productive conversation that will generate real answers and real reforms. And I appreciate all the work from members of both of our committees to help us achieve this absolutely essential goal. I would now like to recognize Ranking Member Paul for his opening remarks.
18 days ago, a would-be assassin managed to climb onto a roof 400 feet from the stage where the former president and leading presidential candidate Donald Trump was speaking. The assassin's bullet struck President Trump, narrowly missing a fatal blow thanks to a last-minute head turn. Tragically, not everyone was so fortunate. A beloved husband and father in the audience was killed, his life stolen in an instant. 2 others remain seriously injured, their futures uncertain. The lives of law enforcement officers working the event and those in the audience have been forever changed. Yet the media has shamefully moved on to other stories, and Google has been caught trying to suppress iconic images of a bloody Donald Trump, images showcasing the resolve of our nation in the face of the attack. But the American people have not forgotten, and we will not forget. There is no question that this was a monumental failure by the Secret Service. They had one job, and they failed. We know that. What remains unclear is who specifically failed, how they failed, and what must be done to ensure that something like this never happens again. America deserves to know that those responsible for this failure are frankly not going to be in charge of securing the upcoming Democrat National Convention. We need to know that someone's been placed on suspension, that someone won't be in charge of the next Donald Trump rally. Now, I was encouraged to hear that the acting director, Rowe, has initiated a disciplinary investigation in addition to the ongoing Secret Service policy review. This is an important step. However, real accountability will require a comprehensive examination of all the facts, which still remain unclear. This past Friday, my investigative team went to Pennsylvania to meet with local law enforcement and document the scene. One of the concerning things my team was told is that no one from Secret Service has talked to them since the shooting. I don't know how an investigation into what failed can be conducted without talking to the officers and agencies who were relied upon to do much of the work. Many questions remain unanswered about the planning and performance of security for July 13th. While a host of errors led to this security disaster, we now know local enforcement officers were suspicious of the shooter 90 minutes in advance of the shooting. There are two glaring issues we need to focus on. First, why were the AGR grounds and the roof left unattended? Why was the AGR building, the shooter's perch, left outside the perimeter? Local law enforcement told my staff that they specifically flagged the vulnerability of the building to the Secret Service and were told that it would be taken care of. Clearly, these vulnerabilities were not addressed. Second, why was Donald Trump allowed to take the stage, and why wasn't he removed from the stage when a suspicious individual was taking increasingly suspicious activities? Over 20 minutes before President Trump began his speech, the Secret Service Command Center had been made aware of an individual with a rangefinder. At least 10 minutes before it was confirmed, the Secret Service's counter-sniper team had been made aware of the suspicious subject and provided a photograph and a detailed description. Why was the event not delayed until the individual was found and checked out? Interviews with local law enforcement paint a different picture in critical places from what we have been told by the Secret Service in other briefings. Now we need to hear from the Secret Service agents responsible for security that day. Our committee has formally requested interviews with those agents, but we have not yet been allowed to speak to them. I expect Director Rowe today to tell us when we will be allowed to talk to these people. Finally, let me close with this. Mistakes, grave mistakes were made on July 13th, but that does not take away from the bravery of dozens of federal, state, and local officers that day. We are grateful for their sacrifices and professionalism. They deserve the truth now also. It is our duty and our utmost responsibility to ensure that we learn from this failure and hold those responsible accountable.
I would now like to recognize Chairman Durbin of the Senate Judiciary Committee for his opening remarks.
Thank you, Senator Peters. This is a rare joint meeting of the two committees, but we have matching jurisdiction, and I think it's the most efficient way to get to the truth. So thank you for letting us join you today. We've all seen the movies. We've read the books. The international assassin with sophisticated technology, elaborate plans, well-honed skills, sets out to kill a leading political figure in the United States. But how does that match the reality of what happened in Butler, Pennsylvania, when a 20-year-old introverted college student outsmarted one of the most sophisticated American law enforcement agencies in history, came within an inch of killing a former president of the United States? That's why we gathered today to ask these hard questions. There's more to this story and other aspects that we ought to consider as well. We cannot lose sight of the factor that contributed to the violence on July 13th. Widespread, easy access to AR-15 military-style rifles. While we rely on the Secret Service to protect elected officials, we must acknowledge the unique challenges they face in light of the proliferation of weapons of war on our street. Pennsylvania, like many states, allows individuals to openly carry a loaded rifle without a permit. To make matters worse, assault rifles can easily be purchased from unlicensed dealers without a background check because of dangerous loopholes in our gun laws. This same kind of firearm has been used to carry out mass shootings in Newtown, Uvalde, Las Vegas, and Highland Park, Illinois, killing dozens of children and adults and injuring many more. Looking across this dais, I recognize we have our differences on many issues, but when it comes to the protection of the president and presidential candidates, we should stand united. We know that protecting our elected officials is essential to a functioning democracy. I hope this hearing can be an example of how we will work together on a bipartisan basis to not only understand this shocking event, but to ensure it never happens again. We must do this without the incendiary language and conspiracy mongering that too often dominates our political discourse today. Ongoing investigations by the Secret Service and the FBI are critical, but Congress, The victims' families and the American people deserve transparency and accountability now. I'll now turn to my partner on the Judiciary Committee, Ranking Member Lindsey Graham.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Several of us from the military have a military background. If this happened in the military, a lot of people would be fired. And if a lot of people are not fired, the system failed yet again. Having said that, the people who are brave and jumped on the stage to protect the president need to be applauded. We need to learn what happened, make corrective action, but somebody's got to be fired. Nothing's going to change until somebody loses their job. Thank you.
It's the practice of the Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee to swear in witnesses. So if our two witnesses could please stand and raise your right hand. Do you swear that the testimony you will give before this committee will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you. You may be seated. Our first witness is Ronald Rowe, Jr. Mr. Rowe is currently the Acting Director of the United States Secret Service. Prior to this role, Acting Director Rowe was the 23rd Deputy Director of the Secret Service. He has had a distinguished 25-year career in the Secret Service, from coordinating major security operations to collaborating with other government and law enforcement agencies. Additionally, he has served as the Chief of Staff to the Director, as Deputy Assistant Director for the Office of Protective Operations, and as Deputy Assistant Director for the Office of Intergovernmental and Legislative Affairs. Mr. Director, thank you for appearing before this committee today. You are now recognized for your opening statement.
Good morning. Chairman Peters, Chairman Durbin, Ranking Member Paul, Ranking Member Graham, and distinguished members of the committees. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. A critical part of the Secret Service mission is protecting our nation's current and former government leaders. The attempted assassination of former President Donald J. Trump on Saturday, July 13th, 2024, in Butler, Pennsylvania, was a failure on multiple levels. I join you and all Americans in condemning the horrific assault on former President Trump, Corey Comparator, James Copenhaver, and David Dutch. And I extend my deepest sympathies to the Comparator family and my sincere wishes for Mr. Copenhaver and Mr. Dutch's continued recovery. Before I begin, though, I want to commend the heroic actions of the men and women of the United States Secret Service on July 13th. Our special agents shielded the former president with their bodies while shots were still being fired, selflessly willing to make the ultimate sacrifice without hesitation. I am extremely proud of these actions and those taken by the counter-sniper team to neutralize the threat that prevented further loss of life. And I applaud the actions of our tactical teams that responded so quickly. I would also like to express my gratitude to our federal, state, and local partners. We rely on these critical relationships, which have developed over decades of daily collaboration to secure protective events and conduct criminal investigations. As you're aware, there are multiple ongoing investigations of the attack and the security failures that occurred that day. I pledge my full support to those inquiries so the Secret Service, your committees, and the American people have a thorough and complete understanding of what happened leading up to and during July 13th. I will not wait for the results of those findings to assess where we failed that day. I have taken and will continue to take immediate steps to ensure we do not repeat those failures. Since my appointment as the acting director 1 week ago, I identified gaps in our security on July 13th and have implemented corrective actions. One of my first actions as acting director was traveling to the Butler Farm Show site to better understand how our protection failed. I went to the roof of the AGR building where the assailant fired shots, and I laid in a prone position to evaluate his line of sight. What I saw made me ashamed. As a career law enforcement officer and a 25-year veteran with the Secret Service, I cannot defend why that roof was not better secured. To prevent similar lapses from occurring in the future, I directed our personnel to ensure every event site security plan is thoroughly vetted by multiple experienced supervisors before it is implemented. It is clear to me that other protective enhancements could have strengthened our security at the Butler event. As such, I have directed the expanded use of unmanned aerial systems at protective sites to help detect threats on roofs and other elevated threats. I've also directed resources to facilitate our protective site communications, particularly our communications with our state and local partners. In addition, I have instructed the asset request for Secret Service protective details to be approved expeditiously and have ordered the maximum use of requested personnel at protective sites to address this heightened security environment. I've heard your calls for accountability, and I take them very seriously. And given the magnitude of this failure, the Secret Service's Office of Professional Responsibility is reviewing the actions and decision-making of Secret Service personnel in the lead-up to and on the day of the attack. If this investigation reveals that Secret Service employees violated agency protocols, those employees will be held accountable to our disciplinary process. With respect to congressional investigations and requests for information, I instructed my staff to provide full cooperation and respond expeditiously on a continuing basis to ensure you have the information you need to conduct your critical oversight. In my testimony before you today, I will provide details on the Secret Service's advanced security planning for the Butler Farm Show site. Facts as we know them regarding the incident itself, known breakdowns in executing the security plan, and corrective actions that the agency is taking to ensure that nothing like this happens again. But I do not believe that inadequate time to plan for this event was a factor in the failure. As you saw in my written statement, I am prepared to provide an overview of the security planning leading up to and during the July 13th attack. However, I would like to point out that based on what I know right now, neither the Secret Service counter-sniper teams nor members of the former president's security detail had any knowledge that there was a man on the roof of the AGR building with a firearm. It is my understanding those personnel were not aware the assailant had a firearm until they heard gunshots. Prior to that, they were operating with the knowledge that local law enforcement was working an issue of a suspicious individual prior to the shots being fired. I regret that information was not passed to Congress and the public sooner with greater frequency. And I fear this lack of information has given rise to multiple false and dangerous conspiracy theories about what took place that day. And I want to debunk these theories. Let me address one conspiracy directly. The Secret Service counter-sniper neutralized the assailant within seconds after the assailant fired his weapon. That counter-sniper had full discretion to use deadly force to stop an attacker and did not need to seek authorization to fire. I am immensely proud of the selfless dedication of our employees to the mission. Every day, across the globe, the men and women answer the call to protect our nation's leaders, and the standard is no fail for a reason. During our current high operational tempo, I want and I need to ensure that the Secret Service workforce are uplifted so they can focus on carrying out the mission. They have my full support, and I'm confident in their abilities to ensure the safety and security of the people we protect. They are worthy of trust and confidence, and they deserve your support as well as the support of the American people. Chairman Peters, Chairman Durbin, Ranking Member Paul, Ranking Member Graham, and members of the committees, thank you for the opportunity to testify at this joint hearing. I will submit the remainder of my statement for the record, and I will answer your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Rowe. Our second witness is Paul Abate. Mr. Abate is the Deputy Director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation at the Department of Justice. In this role, Deputy Director Abate oversees all FBI domestic and international investigative and intelligence activities. Prior to his appointment as Deputy Director, he has had a distinguished 3 decades within the FBI leading counterterrorism efforts, and most recently as the Associate Deputy Director of the FBI, where he's responsible for the management of all FBI personnel, budget, administration, as well as infrastructure. Mr. Bate, thank you for appearing before the committee here today. You are recognized for your opening remarks.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, Chairman Peters and Durbin, ranking members Paul and Graham, and distinguished members of the committee. It is a privilege to appear before you today to discuss the FBI's investigation of the attempted assassination of former President Trump on July 13th in Butler, Pennsylvania. Before going further, I want to again offer my and our condolences to the victims of this heinous attack, to the family and loved ones of heroic firefighter and father Corey Comparator, to Mr. Dutch, to Mr. Koppenhaver, who continue to recover, and to former President Trump, who was also struck by a bullet fired from the shooter's rifle. Our thoughts and prayers are with each of them and their families and loved ones. Within minutes of the attack, the FBI field office in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, received notification of the assassination attempt and responded to the scene immediately with a surge of resources, quickly moving forward on the investigation. From the outset, the FBI has been investigating this attack as an assassination attempt and an act of domestic terrorism. Our team continues to conduct a full, thorough, and objective investigation and will continue to follow all leads and avenues of investigation to logical conclusion, leaving no stone unturned. While it's not typical to provide details of an ongoing investigation, this, as we all know, is an extraordinarily tragic set of circumstances of the utmost national importance, making it essential to inform the American public and Congress what is known right now with full transparency. The investigation remains focused, of course, on determining motive, identifying any potential co-conspirators or others with knowledge of the attack, and building out a timeline of shooter Thomas Crook's actions in advance of and during the attack. Thus far, though absolutely nothing has been ruled out, the investigation has not identified a motive, nor any co-conspirators or others with advanced knowledge. To date, the FBI team has conducted more than 460 interviews, executed search warrants, including at the shooter's residence, and seized electronic media to include phones, laptops, hard drives, and thumb drives. Legal process has been issued to dozens of companies, and we've received more than 2,000 tips from the public. The full resources of the FBI have been brought to bear in furtherance of the investigation. Agents, analysts, professional staff, experts. I've personally visited the site of this horrific attack and seen firsthand the work of FBI Pittsburgh and our partners on the front line, and want to thank all involved for their ongoing and tireless efforts to get the answers that we need and to deliver justice. Specialized resources deployed included evidence response teams, victim services specialists, laboratory and operational technology division resources to process physical and digital evidence, a shooting reconstruction team. Additionally, our explosive experts have analyzed the 3 IEDs recovered, 2 from the shooter's vehicle, 1 from the family residence. And our behavioral analysis unit, importantly, is helping to build a profile of the shooter to include his mental state. Next, I want to provide a brief highlighted overview of the timeline that has been established to date through witness interviews and other information. Again, this is our understanding at present and is subject to change and further refinement as more facts are collected. On July 3rd, the rally in Butler, Pennsylvania was announced. On July 6th, the shooter registered to attend the rally and performed a search for, quote, how far was Oswald from Kennedy? On July 7th, the shooter traveled from his home to the Butler Farm Show grounds and remained there for approximately 20 minutes. We assess this shows advanced planning and reconnaissance on his part. On July 12th, the shooter traveled from his home to the Clairton Sportsman Club, where he practiced shooting. On the morning of July 13th, at approximately 10 a.m., the shooter returned to the farm show grounds and remained there for about 70 minutes before returning home again. At approximately 1:30 p.m., while at the residence, the shooter's father gave him a rifle for the purpose, he believed, of going back to the Sportsman Club. About 25 minutes later, the shooter purchased ammunition while en route to the Butler Farm Show grounds. The subject then arrived at the scene and was moving around the farm show grounds close to the American Glass Research AGR building, from which he ultimately committed the attack. Shortly thereafter, at approximately 3:51 p.m., the shooter flew a drone approximately 200 yards from the farm show grounds for about 11 minutes. The drone and controller were later found in the subject's car. Analysis has not revealed any photos or video taken by the drone, but we can confirm that he was live streaming at the time and would have been able to view it on his controller. The first reported sighting of the shooter by local law enforcement was at approximately 4:26 p.m. At approximately 5:10 p.m., the shooter was again identified by local law enforcement as a suspicious person around the AGR building. And at approximately 5:14 p.m., a local SWAT operator took a photo of the shooter. At about 5:32 p.m., local SWAT observed the shooter next to the AGR building using his phone, browsing news sites, and with a rangefinder. At approximately 5:38 p.m., the photo of the shooter taken earlier was sent to local SWAT operators in a text message group. Subsequently, approximately 25 minutes prior to the shooting, the U.S. Secret Service command post was notified of a suspicious person. Officers lost sight of the subject from approximately 6:02 p.m. to 6:08 p.m., but continued to communicate with each other in an attempt to locate him. Recently discovered video from a local business shows the shooter pulling himself up onto the AGR building rooftop at approximately 6:06 p.m. And at approximately 6:08 p.m., the subject was observed on the roof by local law enforcement. At approximately 6:11 p.m., a local police officer was lifted to the roof by another officer, saw the shooter, and radioed that he was armed with, quote, a long gun. Within approximately the next 30 seconds, the shots were fired. The evidence recovery team found 8 shell casings at the scene next to the shooter's body. We believe the subject, the shooter, fired 8 rounds. While the investigation has not determined motive, the investigative team continues to review information from legal returns, including online and social media accounts. Something just very recently uncovered that I want to share is a social media account which is believed to be associated with the shooter in about the 2019-2020 timeframe. There were over 700 comments posted from this account. Some of these comments, if ultimately attributable to the shooter, appear to reflect anti-Semitic and anti-immigration themes, to espouse political violence, and are described as extreme in nature. While the investigative team is still working to verify this account to determine if it did in fact belong to the shooter, we believe it important to share and note it today, particularly given the general absence of other information to date from social media and other sources of information that reflect on the shooter's potential motive and mindset. These are the facts, in part, that the investigation has revealed to date. While the shooter is dead, our work is very much ongoing and urgent. Thank you, and I look forward to answering any and all questions.
Thank you, Mr. Abaid. We'll now proceed. Chairman Durbin and Ranking Member Graham will ask the first 2 questions. I will then ask question Ranking Member Paul, and then after that, we will alternate between members of the judiciary, recognized by Chairman Durbin, and members of the Homeland Security Committee, recognized by me. With that, Senator Durbin, you're recognized for your questions.
Thank you, Senator Peters. I would like to begin by making a statement. It's not in the form of a question, and you'll understand why when I say it. In 20 days, we're going to start the Democratic National Convention in Chicago. I have been briefed by the law enforcement agencies plans for security for that event. Tens of thousands of people will be there, including some of the highest-ranking politicians in the United States. I trust that both of your agencies can answer in the affirmative if I ask you whether you're actively engaged in working with the development of security plan, taking into consideration the lessons of July 13th.
Senator, that is 100% yes from the Secret Service.
Yes, from the FBI as well, sir. We've been working on this for well over a year in preparation.
I'm not going to ask for details for obvious reasons, but I do want to ask a question about the Secret Service staffing. Congress has nearly doubled the budget for the Secret Service over the last 10 years, from $1.8 billion in fiscal year 2014 to $3 billion in fiscal year 2024. Despite this large increase in funding, the number of agents in protective operations has fallen from 4,027 to 3,671 during that same time period, an approximate 9% reduction. Acting Director Rowe, What accounts for protective operations losing 356 agents over the past 10 years?
So Senator, with respect to where we are today on staffing, and then I'll address the 10-year where we were. In this year alone, we are going to end the year on the positive of 200-plus agents. That's the first time in a number of years that we've been able to do that. Part of that was gaining some efficiencies in our hiring process. But what I want to re-emphasize is that we have not dropped standards. Only 2% of every applicant actually makes it through the hiring process. We are filling our classes at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center, and we are doing this ramp up as part of what lies ahead of us with the LA Olympics in 2028. With respect to what has happened in years prior, this is a difficult and challenging job, being a Secret Service agent. Living your life by somebody else's schedule, constantly away from your family, constantly having to meet increased operational and investigative demands, which we gladly do. But it's not for everyone. And I think there are times where people have to make tough choices and they decide to leave the agency. But that doesn't mean that they were any less of an agent or that they weren't committed to the mission, because we are all committed to being patriots and serving our country and protecting our nation's highest leaders. I think there was a variety of factors. Some of it was the pandemic. Some of it was the economy or other opportunities. We have people that are very skilled in cyber that often leave the job. Some of the protective skills that they acquire are also in demand in the private sector. But some of the mechanisms that we've put in place just in the last year is also retaining our workforce. And that's what we are focused on right now.
The Government Accountability Office has determined that restaffing from these losses have been slowed due to a number of factors, including the years-long background checks for prospective agents and the assignments agents must work through before being assigned to protection. Given these constraints, what steps have you taken to improve recruitment?
So we're actually putting out targeted recruitment opportunities. So we've just recently put it out for within our uniform division for our counter sniper unit, our hazardous agent medical emergency response unit, our counter assault team on the special agent side. So we're actually trying to gather the best and the brightest. And I will tell you that we are having great success with a lot of these vacancies. But what I want to reiterate is that, for example, on the counter assault vacancy, we had 700 applicants that applied for this. Really what we will glean after they make it through the process, and they have to be able to hold a top secret SCI clearance, will be, if we realize 15 out of that tranche, that's a 2% pass rate. So it is very competitive, and we are trying to make sure that we are getting the best and the brightest without dropping standards.
One last question for either one of you. What is the purpose of a rangefinder? And once this assassin was identified as using a rangefinder, wasn't that proof positive that he was a dangerous individual?
So I'll say, Senator, that obviously somebody is trying to determine where they are in proximity to a location, a fixed location. I'll defer to my colleague here, but I believe it was a recreation or sports related. I thought I had read that it was a golf range finder. Nonetheless, it still would have provided him the ability to provide the distance that he was away from his intended target.
Wasn't that enough?
As far as raising suspicion,
Yes,
I think he was identified as being suspicious by local law enforcement.
and nothing happened.
Well, I know that local law enforcement was attempting to locate him.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Member Graham.
Thank you. Let's go back to the resources. Do you need more money?
Senator, listen, there is a single branch, a single agency in the executive branch that could that needs more money. Everyone would take more resources. We've had a great relationship with the Department of Homeland Security, the Office of Management and Budget.
Do you feel constrained to ask for more resources by anybody?
No, sir, we don't. And actually, we have a great relationship with our appropriators and obviously the authorizing committees, and they have always looked out for the Secret Service.
So I would encourage you to think big when it comes to resourcing the department in light of what happened here. At the time of the shooting, the Iranians were threatening high-level American officials, including President Trump, right?
Senator, it's widely
Is that
known.
right, FBI?
Yes, Senator, that's 100% correct.
Did that factor into the security footprint?
So, Senator, what I will say is that it is widely known that the Iranians do not like us. I would refer you to the
Well,
National
it's not
Security.
that they don't like us. They threatened to kill certain people,
Yeah.
and they named them.
Correct, sir. But I can't publicly comment.
It's not like, I hate America. I'm going to kill these 3 guys.
Right. I cannot publicly comment, sir, on.
Well, they publicly comment on it. I mean, it's not
But
what
Senator,
you
what I'm
think.
trying to say is I cannot publicly comment
Okay.
on what
Fair enough.
intelligence, but I can
enough.
assure you that we do a threat-based protective model.
I'd like to have that model provided to the committee. Could you do that?
Yes, sir.
Could you also give us the protocols that are in place to secure a site like this?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. One, the protective detail around President Trump, I know them all very well. They're brave men and women. And these questions are not to belittle anybody. They're trying to find out how the system fails so badly. You say you're not reluctant to ask for more money. What do we need to do to make it easier to hire people without lowering our standards? I mean, I know it's a hard job. Can we do anything to help you?
So I think we're willing to take that back, sir. I think we're working on our time to hire. We've
Well, if you had
actually-
more people, you'd have more time off.
That's true, sir. Yes.
Okay, well, let's get more people, more time off. These are tough jobs. I mean, people on this committee know.
Yes,
I don't
sir.
know how they hold a family together doing what they're doing. It's the military really on steroids. The encrypted app. Paul, can you tell us about these apps? Have they been broken into? The guy had some apps that were encrypted.
I think we've experienced a range of returns on this. Some of the applications that he was using online were encrypted in nature, some of the email accounts.
Have we
that he
broken
was,
into them?
We've received returns. There are some that we have not been able to get information back because of their encrypted nature.
Is
That
there any
in
way
fact
to
true.
solve that problem?
Sir, Senator, we've talked about this before. We need a solution that provides lawful access to law
So
enforcement.
you're telling me the guy that took 8 shots at the president, former president, has apps that we can't get into that may, if you could get into, reveal some relevant information?
That is correct, Senator.
So if he were talking to some foreign power, and I don't think any foreign power would hire this guy, by the way, so I'm not overly worried this was some great plot by the Iranians because they couldn't even think of this. However, there could come a day where something like this is very important. How do we solve this problem?
Senator, as we've been saying, we need a solution that provides lawful access where when we go to
So
a
you're
company.
telling me, I agree with you, I'm not blaming you. We have encrypted apps of an assassin, a murderer, and we can't get into them all these days after. That needs to be fixed, folks. I'm all for privacy, but to a point. What if, in the future, somebody's using these apps to communicate with a foreign power? I think we need to know these things. We need to know them in real time. So lessons learned is that everything failed. Corrective action, seems to me you need more money and more people. Accountability. At the end of the day, how many people do you think will be relieved of their duties, Mr. Rowe, because of this?
Senator, I publicly cannot, and I cannot weigh in on that right
Sure.
now, right? It has to be a fair and neutral
Absolutely.
process.
From a
right?
fair point of view, would you say this is a major system failure at every turn, and those in charge of the system in question, not only was it embarrassing, they failed?
So, Senator, again, if there were policy violations, those individuals will be held accountable and they will be subject
Just
to
send
our
us the
table of
policies
penalties.
if you could.
Yes, sir,
Thank
we
you.
will. But they will be held to our table of penalties, which
Thank you.
will include up to termination.
Thank you.
Director Rowe, in your testimony here today, as well as in your written testimony, you said very, very clearly that you can't defend why that building with with the shooter on top of it was not better covered. You were very clear. You cannot defend that. So my question to you is, my understanding is that there's a detailed site survey that is done prior to an event to identify potential threat points. So talk to me about that site survey. I'm sure you've had a chance to look at it now after action. And how did that site survey get approved when it was so clear that that was a major threat from that building?
Thank you, Senator. So our Pittsburgh field office did the advance. During that advance, not only were they discussing amongst themselves about mitigating the line of sight, but also they were discussing with other agencies that were supporting it. Our counter snipers met with their counterparts. The team lead and team lead met. They walked the site. They identified the AGR building. And if I may, Senator, if I could point out something right now, if I may, and we will place this for the record, but this is the point of view. This is from the second floor of the AGR building. This point of view is the point of view where the counter sniper team locally was posted. The gold arrow indicates where the shooter fired from. Looking left, why was the assailant not seen? When we were told that building was going to be covered, that there had been a face-to-face that afternoon, that our team leads met. This was the view. Let me show you another view, Senator. B. This view is a reenactment by one of my agents. Laying flat. There is a 5-inch rise on the middle of that roof. The assailant would have had to present his bore over that to get his shot off. The view underneath reflects the perspective that he would have had. Again, I'd call your attention back to the first exhibit if they'd have looked left. Give me C. This is what our counter-sniper team saw. Shooter, no elbows. You barely make out the crown of his head. Below it, the assailant up prone. And let me just tell you, our counter-sniper, this individual, I know him. I consider him a friend. He has covered me operationally in conflict zones. And when I did my time on the President's detail, he exemplifies the courage, the skill, and the ability to respond under great stress in such short time to neutralize a threat and prevent further loss of life. Getting back to your question, Senator, these were discussions that were had between the Pittsburgh field office, the local counterparts, and everyone supporting that visit that day. And that's why when I laid in that position, I could not, and I will not, and I cannot understand why there was not better coverage, or at least somebody looking at that roof line when that's where they were posted.
Director Rowe, the Secret Service, state and local law enforcement were on multiple communication channels, is my understanding, during that time. And as a result, local law enforcement was only able to call in to a state command center that was then relayed from the Secret Service. There seemed to be a recurring issue in emergency situations that we're finding with the federal government, that there's not a seamless way to communicate, particularly if you're relying on local law enforcement to deal with what was clearly a major vulnerability. Local law enforcement in Butler told my staff that they had no way of communicating directly with the Secret Service. And if I listened to Mr. Bates saying there was about a 30 seconds between when the local law enforcement reported that there was a man on the roof with a gun, 30 seconds, if it's communicated directly to a counter sniper team, would that be enough time to react prior to the firing of those shots?
Senator, if we'd had that information, they would have been able to address it more quickly. It appears that that information was stuck or siloed in that state and local channel. I will tell you, though, that there were, our tactical elements did have, not only did they have embeds from Butler County ESU with them, but they also had radios on the tactical net. It is troubling to me that we did not get that information as quickly as we should have. We didn't know that there was this incident going on, and the only thing we had was that locals were working an issue at the 3 o'clock, which would have been the former president's right-hand side, which is where the shot came. Nothing about man on the roof, nothing about man with a gun. None of that information ever made it over our net.
So that will change?
Yes, sir. We are working right now to figure out the interoperability and also make sure that we do have access to those channels, whether through the counterpart system or some other means.
Very good. Ranking Member Paul, you're recognized for your questions.
Director Rowe, I'm encouraged by your attitude and what you brought here today, what you've talked about as far as immediate changes that you've made, and I hope you'll follow through with that. I'm encouraged by the fact that you acknowledge that it's indefensible that the roof was unattended. Would you say the roof being unattended breaches standard protocol for setting up a security perimeter?
What I would say, Senator, is that that roof should have had better coverage, and we will get to the bottom of if there were any policy violations.
I would think indefensible would go along with breaching protocol, and I can't imagine how indefensible would not be breaching protocol. What I would caution, though, is that I sense, and you're the Secret Service, and these people are your friends, and they are heroic people who do good things, that we can't let our friendships blind us from responsibility. So someone's in charge of the security at the zone. Would the Secret Service be in charge of the entire operation and they work with law enforcement, but they're in charge? The person in charge of the entire operation is the Secret Service, not the local police.
You're correct, sir. This is a failure of the Secret Service.
So that's what I mean. And look, I don't wish anybody harm. I appreciate the bravery of the Capitol Hill Police. I was at the shooting at the ball field. I've heard 100 shots coming my way. Fortunately, none came to me. But I appreciate the bravery of all the people who protect us. But there's also the idea that there are certain mistakes that don't make you a bad person, but they're just inexcusable, that if you made that mistake. So for example, let's say you determine, well, local police should have been on there and they told us, and local police says, no, they didn't tell us to do it, and it's a he said, she said. Still, ultimately, the agent in charge should be walking the grounds and say, there's a roof 100 yards away from the stadium with a clear sight. Someone's got to be on the roof. Local police, I told you to get on the roof. Get on the roof. Or you put the Secret Service. So ultimately, the buck doesn't pass along to somebody. Whoever's in charge is in charge. But really, I think it would be helpful to all of us. I know the process has to be meted out, but there needs to also be a process for protecting the next Trump rally. The fact that whoever was in charge in Butler next week is not in charge of a rally in Las Vegas. And so I think you really should say that. You should simply say that the leadership from that event is going through a process, but until that process, they won't be in charge of the Democrat National Convention. That would reassure a lot of people that they won't be in charge of security until it's determined. Can you tell us something to that accord?
Yes, sir. So I can tell you that the team planning the Democratic National Convention, that is a national special security event. That team has been on the ground. That's from D.C. With support from our Chicago field office. But I just want to reiterate that our Pittsburgh field office staff, they are wearing this harder than anybody right now in the Secret Service. Right. They feel completely demoralized. And what I'm trying to do is also let them know that, listen, they need to be focused on the mission at hand. I also have to walk a tightrope here and make sure that I am not
Well, I understand.
tainting any
and
future,
from
you know,
one
discipline
point,
action.
I understand, and I have great respect for all the officers, but ultimately, someone had to be in charge, and someone made a terrible error, and it's an error of judgment. The big error is the roof. But another big error is we have 90 minutes of a suspicious person. Now, Senator Durbin mentioned the rangefinder. None of these are enough to shoot a suspicious person, but they certainly, you would think, would be enough to stop the proceedings. That's where I think you get to the second major management or judgment error of this. Now, Trump's done probably 100 rallies like this. How often at one of his rallies are there 90 minutes of looking at one person and at least a half a dozen pictures of that person? How often does that happen? And is it against protocol to let a proceeding go on when you've got a suspicious person, 90 minutes worth of people talking about this person, and we don't stop the proceeding? Does that defy protocol?
So Senator, so while there's 90 minutes in total from when he's first identified by local law enforcement, we have about a 30-minute window. But at no time is there anything ever communicated about weapon or harm. And I think that's where the threat.
A weapon, you shoot people with a weapon.
Sure.
Without a weapon, we're talking about people you stop and say, he had a backpack, which was probably big enough to have the AR-15 in it. In all likelihood, the backpack has the weapon in it. So a guy with a big backpack would never get through the perimeter. So once again, a big mistake was not having the perimeter wide enough to prevent people from shooting outside the perimeter. But the thing is, he would have never gotten through the perimeter, right? His backpack would have been checked. But people with big backpacks are very suspicious. And I would think he's been seen 6 times. But you got 20 or 30 minutes of knowing about it. But the thing is, there's all kinds of chatter going on about this. And you would think the chatter going on with the local police is on a police radio, and a policeman with that radio is standing in the control tent, so you get that communication. So there's a huge and massive breakdown. But really my question is, how often has this happened at other rallies where there's a half a dozen pictures and 90 minutes of people talking about a suspicious person? I just can't imagine that it's real common.
So, Senator, at rallies, there are people that come to the attention of law enforcement for a variety of reasons. You know, if they come to our attention for some other activity that might, you know, put it a little bit, hey, we probably need to go check that individual out. This happens, and that's why we attempt to locate them. That's why it's important for us to try to find them. And it's important to have the information. And so local law enforcement did their very level best to try to locate him. They did provide us the photos 30 minutes prior. It just, he evaded any detection by law enforcement.
But once again, it's the overall person in charge. It's a terrible breakdown. It's a terrible management decision not to have stopped it. There was a chance to stop the proceeding. And the question is not whether there's enough information to take down an individual. It's a much lower standard to say, hey, we're going to wait until we get this individual. The roof and the 90 minutes of it, both I think are failure of your protocol. And I think when that's determined, the person who made these decisions can't be in a position of authority again.
Senator Klobuchar.
Thank you very much. Thank you to all of you for holding this hearing. I appreciated Director Rowe when we had the classified briefing, and also today, taking responsibility for the agency and your own personal emotion and reaction to your visit and what had gone wrong. For the people in my state that keep asking me, I just don't get how he got on the roof. I know we've gone through great details and a lot of examination. Could you just give a minute on what went wrong and how you think it can be fixed? Because I think it's just going to help to dispel the conspiracy theories. There are some people that think it didn't really happen, which of course is completely ridiculous. It did. There are some people that think all kinds of conspiracies went on within the government, which is also false. But could you just tell them what went wrong so they understand?
Yes. No, thank you, Senator. I thought long and hard about this. I think this was a failure of imagination, a failure to imagine that we actually do live in a very dangerous world where people do actually want to do harm to our protectees. I think it was a failure to challenge our own assumptions, the assumptions that we know our partners are going to do everything they can, and they do this every day. But we didn't challenge our own assumptions of we assume that someone's going to cover that. We assume that there's going to be uniform presence. We didn't challenge that internally during that advance. So moving forward, I've directed that when we're talking to people and we're making requests, we are very specific about what we want. We are providing explicit instructions on exactly what our expectation is and what we need them to do and what we want them to do. That's the only way that we're going to be able to move forward beyond this. And let me just tell you that our state and local law enforcement partners are the best. So this belief that somehow they are less than federal law enforcement or they're less than the Secret Service, they're out there patrolling communities every day. They're the ones out there going into hazardous conditions every day. They know their communities. They have the ability to enforce state and local laws. Our advanced agents do not.
Right.
We need them, and we need them to be partners with us, and I think we need to be very clear to them, and that may have contributed to this situation.
Yeah, appreciate that. I have the same respect. Next, one of the things you mentioned to me was, and to all of us, was in this other briefing, was just the texting protocol. And I think a lot of us think about this in non-security settings, about how people are just texting all the time instead of talking, and how it takes our eyes off, in your case, the target. Could you talk about what might have gone wrong there and how you think things could change when there's the hope is that their eyes are constantly on the scene and on the potential targets and risks?
Thank you, Senator. So, again, we need people focused on the problem or on their area of responsibility. It was great that there was a text chain, but that communication needs to go over the net. It needs to go over a radio channel so that everyone has situational awareness of it. The point I was making in the closed door briefing is that we have to get to a point now where we are using our radio systems to have that collective awareness of this. I think, one of the things that I've directed is that in addition to the interoperability, we're going to roll out common operating picture, a common operating platform that we utilize for national special security events. We have the ability to roll that out to the field that has a Blue Force tracker in it that's able to, where you can put where all your state and local assets are, where our federal assets are. But in addition to that, I want people using the radio. So it's great that the tactical elements are talking to each other. It's great that the shift is talking to each other, but we have to be able to make sure that whenever we come across a situation, that everyone has situational awareness of this. And I will take this, in my time when I was operational in the President's detail, we were given the explicit instruction, hey, if you're going to pass it, if it's relevant enough that you feel like you need to pass that information, do it over the radio. And that was the protocol that we had. And I think over the years, perhaps with the advent of technology and smartphones, perhaps we've gotten away from that. But we need to get people back on the scope, back on mission, back focused on what they need to be responsible for.
Okay, and the next question I'll put in writing. Thank you very much of you, Mr. Abate, but it's just pointing out that we've seen this rise in threats against members of Congress, which of course is relevant to this. 8,000 just last year, more than 4 times over the past 7 years. I'll want to ask you in writing about the steps that the Justice Department is taking to prioritize these cases. I know there's been some changes made.
Yes, Senator, it's of our highest priority, and we're urgently working on it 24/7 every day to protect each and every one of you here.
Appreciate it. Thank you, both of you.
Senator Carper, recognized for your question.
Thanks very much. Mr. Rowe, Mr. Abate, thank you for joining us today. I have the privilege of representing Delaware, the first state to ratify the Constitution. We did that over 200 years ago, and the Constitution sort of outlines how we elect our leaders. And it changes with respect to technology over the years. But there's, for as long as we've been a country, threats to our leaders when they pursue elective office. We're going to be gathering, some of us will be gathering in Chicago in just a few weeks. Others will be gathering in other parts of the country to help make sure that what's was adopted in that original Constitution is actually carried out faithfully. And it's just incredibly important that those who aspire to elective office and those who take on those challenges are protected, and their families are protected, as well as those who surround them. I share with my colleagues my prayers for those who have been killed or injured on July 13th. We're grateful that one of our presidential candidates is okay, but I have a question about what I can't get over how a 20-year-old loner could somehow outsmart two of the smartest federal agencies and state agencies and law enforcement with an odds of like 1,000 to 1, and be able to almost pull this off. It just blows my mind. Hopefully we'll get to the truth and all of that. I'm a Navy guy. I spent many years of my life in the Navy. I learned as a midshipman that when the ship runs aground at sea, the commanding officer is held responsible. Whether the commanding officer is awake, asleep, at the helm, but the commanding officer is held responsible. And I think we have to make, at the end of the day, I'm not interested in a blame game, but I'm sure interested in finding out who was responsible and making sure that they account for their responsibility. My question is, what policies are currently in place to facilitate real-time information sharing between the Secret Service and local law enforcement during an event? And what changes to information sharing practices will the Secret Service make in light of the apparent breakdown in communications on July 13th?
Thank you for that question, Senator. So we're looking at our procedures. We rely on a counterpart system, and the radio interoperability it's a complex challenge. It's not just about being able to find whatever frequency our local counterparts are on and then just piping it in. There's some technical challenges that have to be there. So to alleviate that, we've always relied on a security room where we have representatives from the local agencies. Those individuals are there to, one, bring their own radio and then relay relevant information that would impact our security plan. I think what I'm looking at, and again, what I'm in looking at this situation is there was a unified command post, and we had our security room, and we had communications that day at the Butler Farm site were challenging. Not just challenging for the Secret Service, but challenging for locals. There were some cellular issues. There were radio issues, and you saw that with the testimony from the colonel from Pennsylvania State Police last week in the House. So I think as I'm thinking about this, I think we need to consider what is our model moving forward? And I think we need to be where the greatest amount of partners are when that information is being discussed. The other thing that I'm looking at is we need to also make sure that we have redundancies as far as cellular on the ground or additional repeaters. And so I've directed our Chief Information Officer to do that, and we are rolling assets out now supporting campaign sites.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Mr. Bay, quick question. Based on the initial information you've gathered from the investigation, do you believe there were any actions taken by the shooter in the weeks, days, or hours leading up to the shooting that should have caused alarm and grabbed the attention of law enforcement?
He did not have any interactions with law enforcement leading up to this, Senator. We haven't found anything yet that would have alerted law enforcement or FBI or Secret Service to his intention activities in advance of this event. I will note, however, to your prior question, that we do have a very strong relationship, an integrated relationship between FBI and Secret Service and every other federal, state, local agency you can imagine. We have constructs like the Joint Terrorism Task Forces and Violent Crime Task Forces where we're cross-embedded with each other. And when it comes to this event and others like it, we're always talking in advance. In fact, with respect to this event, we did have a meeting between U.S. Secret Service and FBI in the days leading up to the event to determine, assess whether there was any information or intelligence pertaining to a threat against the rally or to former President Trump or anyone else there. There was an absence of that in the lead-up specifically, and again, none of us had any information in our holdings with regard to the ultimate shooter.
All right, thank you for that. Thanks very much, both of you.
Next on the Senate Judiciary Committee is Senator Grassley.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to introduce my oversight letters and investigative documents into the record. This is information I've already made public.
Without objection.
Okay, thank you. I'd also like to call my colleagues' attention to a legislation that Senator Cortez Matos and I've introduced would require Senate confirmation of the Director of the Secret Service. I think this is very important because no other agency has a no-fail mission. Mr. Rowe, in your written testimony, you stated that that to prevent similar lapses like the one on July 13th from happening again, you'll ensure every event site security plan is thoroughly vetted by multiple experienced supervisors before it's implemented. Based on your testimony, the security plan for the Butler event deviated from the Social Security standards. How would vetting by multiple experienced supervisors fix that?
So, Senator, I think having many eyes on a particular problem set helps. That way you don't have tunnel vision, you just focus in on one thing. And so that's why I think it's important, not only at the field office level, but also at the detail level. And part of what we had started doing with the former president's detail is having them send out site agents, having them send out supervisors. And I think having that collaboration and having additional eyes to examine the problem will make sure that we're not missing anything. And I think I want that surety for myself. I think
you've answered my question.
Yes,
Let me
sir.
go on. Also to you, in your written testimony, you stated that you, quote, regret that information wasn't passed to Congress and the public sooner and with greater frequency. What's your communication plan going forward to ensure that the American people in Congress are fully informed?
So, Senator, we just started a rolling production that is bicameral. So we made our first rolling production last week. We made one yesterday. We will continue to do that. And my view is that sunshine is the best disinfectant, and we intend to provide information to Congress as it carries out its oversight function.
Okay, also to you, I made public documents that show Secret Service deployed a counter unmanned aerial system operator on July the 13th. According to the Secret Service, the drone system was supposed to be operational at 3 p.m. that day. However, we've been told by Secret Service that because of cellular bandwidth problems, it wasn't operational until about 5:20 of that day. If the system was operational, Secret Service would have had the ability to detect the shooter and his own drone use. Why is the Secret Service dependent upon local cellular network? Does the Secret Service have a backup plan in place?
Yes, thank you, Senator. And that is something that I briefed in the closed door. And again, something that has cost me a lot of sleep because of the eventual outcome of the assailant. That what if we had geolocated him because that counter-UAS platform had been up? It is something that I have struggled with to understand.
Service, a little salute and such. Almost every week I get a letter from someone who is somewhat surprised that a Foreign Service officer has helped them in a time of difficulty when they're ill or something, and they write a note and they're like, I'm surprised by this. Like, I don't know why I'm surprised, but this person went beyond the call to help me and my family in their time of need. And I think there is a tendency not to recognize the unbelievable competence and patriotism of these people. And no one tells them, thank you for your service. I think we should do that for the military folks, absolutely. But we need to recognize that these people are often working in harm's way, lesser resources, under enormous duress. You see them yourself, you're out there traveling. I think, as I tried to say, I think there are often real issues. Take it out on the political people. Take it out on me. Our career people deserve to be able to serve. When I meet with them, and it's been 2 years as they're waiting, I don't have a good answer for that. And I also think it makes me feel like I can't do my job persuading people that I respect to get on with this, to move this on. And trust me, there is not one country where we're contesting China, where we go to that country and we've got a strong ambassador and China doesn't have someone.
Listen,
They're out there and we need more people on the field.
I couldn't agree more. I do have a question about China, just with the little bit of time I have left, and that is, as we're looking at the potential for an expansion of a broader war in the Middle East, with Israel targeting southern Lebanon because of the horrible acts of Hezbollah, where is China going to come down on this, and what role are they going to play?
So I will say this, Senator, before this is a horrible, tragic war. There were a lot of concerns about how China's influence had grown. Yes, they played a role between Saudi Arabia and Iran. You'll note that since the conflict has begun, tragic, horrible, the country that people call to engage, to be involved directly, is the United States. And China is largely absent. Their engagement has been largely shallow. I would say I do not believe, Senator, that they don't want to see an enlargement in the war. And I think they are worried about the potential for escalation. But at the same time, they really haven't weighed in with their diplomatic might in the situation involving the Houthis. They have not been as direct about their concerns about escalation to Iran. They have raised it in certain circumstances, but not with the power and influence of a great power like China. I think we would expect them to do more, and we continue to call on them, as we do on other countries, to make sure that their voices are felt. I do acknowledge that this is a extremely delicate and worrisome time, and we're doing, Secretary Blinken, in addition to, he's on this long trip through the Indo-Pacific, he's on the phone every night with the countries in Latin America to basically figure out our best way forward on Venezuela, but he's also working the phones in the Middle East to try to prevent a escalation and, frankly, to move us towards a hostage exchange and a better set of circumstances in Gaza.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Barrasso.
Well, thanks so much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much for being here today. We had a briefing last week that many of us attended on the committee on basically who's helping Russia and what roles there are in that. And I wanted to go along that area of questioning because I'm concerned about China's support for our adversaries. Clear China's actively helping both Russia and Iran evade U.S. sanctions. In fact, oil revenues from China are propping up Russian and Iranian economies. They get to buy them at a discount, so China benefits from that, and then Iran and Russia get the money from China. I view China as using Russia as a wrecking ball. China using Russia as a wrecking ball. Iran right now is exporting almost 1.3 million barrels of oil to China every day. When there's supposed to be sanctions in place, the Treasury Secretary says, well, they can't do any more, but the New York Times pointed out just how much oil we're allowing, that the U.S. is allowing, and the sanctions that are being evading. The Chinese Communist Party providing the materials, the technology, the components that Russia and Iran need to wage their wars. So it just seems to me the administration has failed to prevent China from purchasing Russian and Iranian energy resources. Do you agree?
So first of all, let me just underscore, I completely accept your proposition. Increasingly, we're seeing a group of nations of aggrieved actors that are challenging the United States and its partners globally, and that includes China, Iran, North Korea, occasionally others associated with that effort. My own sense is the most important arena, Senator, that we need to contest that, frankly, is currently in Ukraine. And you mentioned this, but what China has done in supporting the Russian defense industrial base is a subject of deep concern. Now, we've sanctioned hundreds of firms, but the most important sanctions, frankly, are around financial institutions. And I would just have you note that if you look at the trajectory that Europe has traveled in just 8 to 10 months, 8 to 10 months ago, almost no mention of what China is doing in Russia. Look at the NATO statements that took place in Washington, with many senators supporting that effort and being deeply engaged in the 75th anniversary. Increasingly, Europe is on side and taking their own steps with respect to sanctions, and I believe that this is an arena that our efforts are paying off. I think it is absolutely clear what you're describing, this association between Russia, North Korea, China, and Iran, increasingly purposely challenging us everywhere. I think our primary answer, yes, we have taken sanctions, but Senator, I would tell you that the most important thing that we have done is build a comparable group of allied nations working together. So I would just simply say, not only is NATO probably stronger than ever before, I think you have to give credit to the previous administration focusing on investing in the military, and we've followed through with that. And a lot of countries are now at 2%, well over half, approaching 2/3. It's deeply important. The connections, though, between Europe and the Indo-Pacific, what countries are supporting Ukraine to the hilt now? Japan, South Korea, Australia. This is unprecedented, and that's largely through the support and encouragement of the United States. So I would simply say that I think the best remedy to the challenges that you accurately describe is our ability to work with allies and partners. Earlier in the discussion, we talked about bringing new partners into the fray, countries like India, Vietnam, others in Southeast Asia. I'm proud of the work we've done in the Philippines. But this is something that we're going to have to contest across the board.
Well, let me just add to that, because I agree with what you're saying there. I mean, I view China as the puppet master here, pulling the strings with what's happening in Iran and North Korea, as well as Russia in their efforts. And the concern is that with our involvement in a number of locations around the world, whether it's with Ukraine, whether it's in Israel, that this is an effort by China to ultimately have us engaged in a number of places and ultimately make it easier for them to take Taiwan, which I believe is one of their single goals.
So I would just say this, though, the relationship between these authoritarian countries is very complex, Senator. And I would only offer to you is don't underestimate Russian agency here. Putin is a master at even playing the weak hand. He has his own interests. He's been very effective at maneuvering China in this respect. But I would simply say each are playing their, subtly trying to advance their interests. For the United States, we need to realize that our associations are deeper. They're based on democracy largely, people to people, a large consensus of the people that elect the leadership. These countries are animated by leaders who are distrustful, often deeply distrustful, and they're often subtly maneuvering against each other. Like, I'll give you an example. China and Russia are competing now for influence in North Korea, and China is anxious about some of the steps that Russia has taken with North Korea. China is competing with Russia in the Arctic and the stands. It doesn't mean that there's a division or gulf, but it just means that there is a complex diplomacy among these various countries that are aggrieved by us, and we have to keep that in mind as we construct our own diplomacy towards them.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Murphy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Good to see you, Mr. Secretary. I'm going to ask you two questions, one on disinformation and one on China and the Middle East. So one of China's most effective national security tools is propaganda and misinformation. Their investment dwarfs the investment the United States makes. Estimates are that China's spending somewhere in the neighborhood of $7 billion per year. The United States clearly does some of this work through the Department of Defense, but inside the Department of State exists the Global Engagement Center, which is funded at a relatively paltry $61 million, but over the course of the last half decade has done some pretty extraordinary work to track Chinese misinformation and to help local actors be able to fight back. The Global Engagement Center is set to expire. The authorization for the center is set to expire at the end of this year. What would be the impact if we lost the capacity to help coordinate with allies, help to fund efforts in and around the Chinese theater to combat Chinese misinformation if we lost the authorization for the Global Engagement Center?
Senator, first of all, thank you for the question. Let me just say, I think some of the work that the GEC has done in the last couple of years is deeply innovative and helpful to American purpose. And I commend the work under Jamie Rubin, the leader of the organization, others who work underneath him. I will simply say this, what it has done that has been made a difference in a number of places is simply illuminating the strategies, the actors, and the strategy that both China and Russia have undertaken. And so these countries' ability, China, Russia, to manipulate and maneuver is done largely out of public view. When you expose it, it actually can be quite purposeful and effective. I would simply say that you are absolutely right. It's a small amount of money. We have a little bit at DOD that we're working, but the challenge is enormous. I'll just give you one example, Senator. When I was asked to go to the Solomons to basically contest what the Chinese were doing there, I remember waking up in the morning, getting the local newspaper. On the cover, this is right after the war had started in Ukraine, was a long story about the chemical and biological weapons facilities that the United States maintained in Ukraine, right? Clearly effective Russian and Chinese disinformation. And we just have to do a better job contesting this globally. A first step would just be the GEC reauthorized. I think the GEC has done more on Russia than China, but I think it's stepping up its game substantially on China as well.
Yeah, just in the last year and a half, 22 different reports produced by the GEC specifically naming Chinese propaganda efforts, which, as you state, is sort of the first and sometimes most effective tool. Let me turn to the Gulf. Obviously, we have had a number of conversations with this committee about the administration's conversation around extending a security guarantee to Saudi Arabia that would impact our broader security obligations in the region towards all of our Gulf allies. I want to ask you about the future of Gulf cooperation with China. I think the history suggests that our Gulf allies are sort of seeking to have it both ways, right? We'll play the United States off against China fairly regularly, and there's very recent evidence of that. Saudi Arabia's massive investment in the leading Chinese AI company, certainly contrary to U.S. national security interests, the ongoing maturation of UAE's defense relationship with China. I guess I have two sort of simple questions for you on this portfolio. One, do you agree that a security treaty with a country like Saudi Arabia only makes sense if our China policies are aligned? And two, is there any reason to be optimistic that the Gulf nations are going to do anything other than continue to play the United States and China off against each other to get the best deals that they can get on economic investment, security relationships, et cetera?
So it's an important question, and I do think when we're talking about some of these fundamental decisions on the part of the United States, security guarantees, substantial investments in technology, we often say, look, we don't ask countries to choose, but we want them to have choice in certain circumstances where we're putting our stuff on the line, whether technology or our commitment to support you, I'm afraid it is a binary choice. And I think we would have to insist on that as we go forward. I will say the Middle East is complicated. Senator, you talked about the whole region. There was a period not long ago where Israel, also very deep engagements with China and the United States, has chosen largely now to engage directly with the United States because they understand the nature of what they were doing had implications for their own security, given China's other actions. I wouldn't want to go through a taxonomy of each country in the Gulf, but my guess is that we'll have more luck with some than others. But ultimately, the process of this all rests on other issues being resolved, and it is just enormously challenging. So I do think we are right to try to contest. It's an important region, but at the same time, we also have to be clear that we have some real advantages. Our technology, our security guarantee must not be given lightly, and we must demand many things in response.
Senator Kane.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Secretary Campbell, good to have you. A comment and two questions. So the comment is in a response to an earlier question, you talked about the real importance of focusing on the global South, and of course we should, Africa and the Americas. 32 of the 35 youngest countries in the world are in Africa, and the population growth there, as well as a whole lot of other factors, make it a really important area of strategic focus. And in the Americas, you know, the challenges we have at the border, the challenges with fentanyl, just everyday Americans' concerns about the globe often are issues related to the Americas and political instability there. And yet, we say that a lot, but we're just not doing it. The Article 1 branch, we have to own the absence of confirmed ambassadors, more than 20 openings in the Americas and in Africa. But the Article 2 branch, I just came from the hearing about the 2022 National Defense Strategy. That strategy has one paragraph about the entire Western Hemisphere, not much more about Africa. We are actually reducing military investments in AFRICOM and SOUTHCOM. They continually raise that they are under-resourced. We had an opportunity in the area of the world I'm most familiar with, the Americas. We had a real opportunity in Ecuador following a popular election that threw out a longtime pro-China government to step up and help Ecuador be a success story, a pro-democracy success story. The previous president said, all you got to do is put me in a trade deal. I'm the only nation on the Pacific coast of the United States, of the Americas, that doesn't have a trade deal with the U.S. Ecuador didn't have one because of the pro-China government that had been in place for 25 years. We didn't do it. We basically, the administration, and I strongly support this administration, but the view is that trade deals aren't good politics. We didn't do the one thing that President Lasso was asking us to do, and now we have a much more complicated situation in Ecuador. So the comment that I'm going to make, and then I'll move to a question, is we talk about the global South a lot, but if you measure it by resources, if you measure it by energy or focus, we are going backwards, not forwards. And that really, really troubles me. Now, my question is this. On the fentanyl topic, in November of 2023, Presidents Biden and Xi met in Woodside, California, and they talked about steps that China might take to begin helping us interdict fentanyl by blocking precursors, largely from coming into Mexico. 9 months later, what's the report card on whether those commitments by China are being met or not?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, just on your first questions, when you travel around, you are left with, particularly in the global South, with a sense of there's so much more to do, and there is a concern, as you suggest, Senator, that maybe we're going in the other direction. And I, as a person who has long supported the Indo-Pacific, I recognize that we're moving more of our capacity there, but I don't think we should be short-changing our engagements in Africa or Latin America. It will come back to haunt us. So I share those issues. I believe in them as well. I will also say that, you know, we talk about contesting narratives that the Chinese and the Russians promulgate in the global south. The dominant one that the Chinese and Russians use is the idea of American decline. And those views can be pernicious, and frankly, they can use disinformation, and they can also use headlines from our own newspapers. And I think one of the things that I would suggest is that when we come together in bills or activities that suggest national purpose and a degree of consensus, that's the area that we've largely been the strongest. I see that more, frankly, now in the Indo-Pacific than I do in the global south. My hope is this committee in the future will help us think about bipartisan approaches that are not just about military, but are about our levers of ability to invest, diplomats just across the board. I think I'm probably preaching to the choir here. So the best grade I could give on the fentanyl, I was at Woodside, I was involved in this diplomacy closely, would be an incomplete. There are some modest steps that the Chinese have taken. There are some criminal prosecutions they've undertaken. They've wrapped up a few of the companies involved. I do just want to underscore how challenging this is. There are a large number of precursor chemicals and a large number of companies. They are innovative. They are moving around Asia. I think one of the reasons that China is addressing this issue is not just because we've asked, but Congress has been deeply engaged as well. Frankly, probably the visit of Senator Schumer and the team to China in advance of that had as much of impact than anything that we have done. But I would also say it is the case that synthetic opioids are not just affecting the United States. Europe and parts of Asia and China as well. This is a global scourge. I think increasingly the Chinese recognize that since so much of that is coming from manufacturers in China, that they have to take more steps. They have not done so to date, and we need to stay on them. And this is a critical national security issue for us. I commend you for raising it and focusing on it.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Booker.
Thanks so much. I want to pick up on some of the themes that my friend Tim Kaine brought up, but Mr. Secretary, I'm so grateful that you're here. But I just want to pick up on something because this concern about China and its dealings with Saudi Arabia. Can we just be specific for a second? We are in negotiations with Saudi Arabia on a treaty right now, correct?
So I think it'd be fair to say that we're in deep negotiations with the Saudis. The ultimate manifestation, there are many features
permutations.
of this.
I understand that. I don't want to take all my time doing that. I guess what I'm trying to say is, when I'm in the region, when I'm sitting with leaders there, they want to deal with the United States of America. They want deeper ties, deeper relationships. They know that from technology to economy to military, we're their preferred dance partner. But when we don't engage with them, they're looking for other dance partners to hedge their bets. That's a fair statement, correct?
Yeah.
Now, when it comes to our competition with China, if we find a way to move forward with Saudi Arabia, we get a lot of advantages by locking them in to things that benefit us. Whether it's while China and Russia are trying to undermine our currency, we secure the dollar being used for oil trade. While we have a fierce competition going on militarily, we have shown that when we lean into partnerships, not only with our competitors in Russia or China, but even with our competition for military sales with European countries, we lock Saudi Arabia in. And then when it comes to the economy or technology transfers, we've been able to use our partnerships with other countries to box out the Chinese. And so this is a time that I see, if we're really talking about a global competition, to pick our partners and further lock in American advantages. Wouldn't you say that that's the opportunity that we're at least seeking in these negotiations?
Senator, that's exactly the strategy that we've attempted. I think it has borne the most fruit in the Indo-Pacific, and we talked about this earlier. That's the Quad, that's AUKUS, that's the trilateral with Japan and South Korea, mending fences. It's bringing the Philippines in. It's working with Southeast Asia, with Thailand, with Vietnam, with India.
Yeah, so whether you're talking about India, whether you're talking about Japan, whether you're talking about Australia, whether you're talking about European allies, whether you're talking about Africa or South America, people are looking for strong partnerships. And when we step up, people prefer to deal with us because China has a really bad reputation in these countries. Is it correct?
So look, I would say that, you know, a job like mine, probably a job like yours, there's lots of stuff that could get you down. But I will tell you that the thing that has encouraged me everywhere I've gone is that the demand signal for American engagement is high. And even though they have doubts, sometimes I sometimes sense you walk into a meeting with a leader, he's trying to size up, like, you know, are these guys committed and are they going to be there? If you're able to show them that you're going to engage with sincerity and that you're not coming alone, you're working with other agencies in the U.S. government and with other partners globally that believe in the things that you are advancing, you can have a real impact on the ground. And I've seen that throughout all one of the things that when in my confirmation here, you asked me, he said, Kurt, don't just do the Indo-Pacific, go to Africa. So I've been twice. I have found those countries are thirsty for a deeper American engagement. I intend to do everything I can to support that. So I do think we tend to underestimate ourselves. Our value proposition is strong. Military, technologically, education, everything. And I just think our most important thing is to have confidence in our
my time's running out, and
Okay.
it's music to my ears to hear you say all that. I guess two frustrations. One, not on you, on us. I have seen the power of great ambassadors in the global South to extend the American influence, connection, opportunity. I mean, if you look at Kenya is a great example of what an ambassador can. So the fact that we have so many vacancies is, to me, stunning. It is shooting ourselves in the foot in many ways, undermining our ability to compete. It's like trying to, Stanford trying to play Notre Dame and benching 3 or 4 of its players and playing with a shorthand. I just want to add to that because I know other people have said it. But for the final point I want to bring up here is what is frustrating me when I do travel to Africa is to see how obviously important we see our military strength in trying to counter what we're seeing in the Sahel with terrorism. Like, nobody can argue with that. But the thing that inspires me the most is when I visit and see the power of U.S. investments, not just in Feed the Future or PEPFAR, but business investments and infrastructure investments. The unbelievable, just the libido corridor investment is, to me, how you really do counter what China is trying to do and the urgencies for that. And so I guess what I want to just have you finish on is something as simple as the Development Finance Corporation, which is an incredible tool to compete with. And Congress is going to be considering reauthorizing the BUILD Act, which created the DFC. Just for the record, are there can you express the urgency for something like this, as well as improvements that we could be making in the program as it stands right now?
Thank you, and great questions. Can I just build on a point that you made? So, you know, when you're in a job like mine, you go to these embassies and you're constantly evaluating leadership there. I was just in Gabon. Not a lot of Americans go to visit. First-time ambassador, probably one of the most effective young women. And I watched her engage her team. You know, the State Department occasionally can have highly hierarchical, these guys, young people, first tour, pitching in, feeling they could talk in meetings, hugely impressed. And small amount of assistance, but taking it to the maximum, right? So I left there just like when you went to Kenya, incredibly, unbelievably motivated, wanting to do more and realizing that we can get that done. The DFC is an unusually effective tool. It is incredibly effective. Senator, before you came, I got to be the person to do the groundbreaking of a major DFC initiative in Senegal. it was sensational because unlike Chinese projects that they bring their own people and their own equipment.
I think we're going to have to leave it at that. I'm sorry.
Oh,
You give 2 extra minutes, but.
okay, so I would completely support this. This is incredibly important. DFC, what you need to do is leverage financing. They need more leverage. Like all finance institutions, 5-1, 6-1, 7-1, that would help. Thanks.
Senator Van Hollen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, thank you for your service. Thank you for your strong backing for the men and women of the Foreign Service and for the entire State Department team. Appreciate all that you're doing on their behalf. And I do want to just second the remarks made by some of my colleagues, which you've underscored, which is we need all our players on the playing field. It makes no sense and undermines our interests every day that we do not have ambassadors on post at places around the world, over 20 of them where China has an ambassador, we don't. But just in general, to represent the values and interests of the United States. So it is, it's a dereliction of duty, in my view, that we're not moving these men and women through the process. You mentioned our ambassador in Gabon, and I think she's representative of the great ambassadors that we have around the world. Just to underscore a couple points that you've made and my colleagues have made. First of all, in terms of engaging our NATO and European partners and East Asian partners in support of both our efforts to defend Ukraine against Putin, but also to counter China's efforts to support Russia and Putin in the war machine, not with direct arms transfers, but supporting the military-industrial base. Thank you for your efforts to have a collective initiative with our European partners. I know we need to do more, and I know you're working on that in terms of sanctions on Chinese firms there. Finally, across the global south, you can't beat something with nothing. As you say, you know, we don't ask everybody to choose between the United States and China. We ask them to look at what we both have to offer. We have a lot to offer in terms of our open system, transparency, accountability, investment, but we are not fully engaging in terms of the economic front. DFC is a critical tool. Look, I support our military efforts in Africa, China, but my view is that we're probably overweighted there and underweighted when it comes to these other areas of competition. Now, some parts of the world don't need our direct public investment. They don't need a subsidy. They don't need the DFC. And that includes Saudi Arabia, some of the Gulf countries like the UAE. And I just was 2 weeks ago on a trip that included stops in Saudi Arabia and the UAE. In Saudi Arabia, I met with the Crown Prince. I also met with the Minister of Communications, Abdullah Al-Swawa. He mentioned that he'd had a very productive meeting with you. And then in the UAE, you know, lots of interest in moving forward in this partnership between G42 and Microsoft. So I want to go back a little bit to the question that Senator Murphy raised, Senator Booker really alluded to. On the one hand, we definitely want to be the players of choice when it comes to investment in high tech, right? It was very clear, both the Saudis and the folks in the UAE, they want to engage first and foremost with U.S. companies because of U.S. technological expertise. On the other hand, we do want to make sure that our partners are not, you know, transferring important technological secrets to China and others.
We're looking at a situation in which, at a minimum, people knew that this guy had a gun at least 2 minutes before the shooting happened. I want to know what you can tell me about what happened during that final 2-minute period, where a whole bunch of people in the crowd saw and were shouting, "He's got a gun." During that 2-minute period, perhaps at the beginning of it, the local police started to climb the rooftop, and there was at least 30 seconds after which local police were able to personally observe the shooter with a gun, had the gun pointed at him. What happened during that time period, and why on earth was President Trump not removed from the stage at that moment?
So again, Senator, the reason why President Trump was not removed was, again, we did not have anything more than locals working an issue at the 3 o'clock. wasn't determined as to whether or not it was the same individual or not, and there was no report of
The same individual as what?
the same suspicious individual.
Right,
It was-
but we've left the category of suspicious individual at that point. You've got a guy with a gun on a rooftop 136 yards away from the stage. You know that he's got a gun at that point. What happened during that time period that did not result in President Trump, his protective detail being notified of that, and him immediately being removed from the situation?
Senator, what I will say, and then I'll turn it over to Deputy Director Abate. No information regarding a weapon on the roof was ever passed to our personnel.
How is that even possible? Do you want to comment to that?
Senator, again, I believe that information, and this is probably something my colleague can expound on, information that was in law enforcement, local law enforcement channels, but did not cross over and make it to Secret Service awareness.
Senator, just to clarify the timeline, so the individual was first seen by law enforcement on the roof at about 6:08. We're still working to perfect the timeline based on the radio comms and all that. It wasn't until at 6:11:03 seconds, the officer saw him and called out his arm. That was the first sighting where he had the rifle on the roof, and then he.
And that was relayed to the Secret Service Command Center at that point?
My understanding is no, Secret Service, it was not relayed to them. It's a narrower time frame, though. It's probably about maybe up to half a minute between the time he's seen with the rifle and when the shots are fired.
But there's still time. At that point, if there were an open channel of communication in which they were able to tell him, he's got a gun, take him out. You could still take President Trump off the stage. You could have him duck. You could have the shooter neutralized. Do you not have a channel of communication by which they can say, gun, take him out?
So again, Senator, that information stayed in local channels and did not make it over to Secret Service.
Did they not consider that relevant? You're saying that the local police didn't consider that relevant enough to pass along to the Secret Service?
Sir, I think that they were in the midst of dealing with a very critical situation, and they articulated that over the radio, as I understand it. However, it was never relayed over to us.
Thank you, Senator Lee. Senator Hawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Rowe, can you put your first poster, your first demonstrative back up?
Please put A up, please.
Let's make sure everybody can see it. This is the photograph, I believe, that you took, your team took of the roof, the AGR roof. Yeah, that's the one. Okay, so from this vantage point, as the law enforcement who are in those windows, as they look left, they should be able to see the shooter clearly there on the AGR second floor roof. My question is, why is there not a Secret Service counter sniper on that roof?
So, Senator, when we post up, our methodology is to look at things that can see in on our protectees, so that they can provide that coverage.
But why is there not a Secret Service counter sniper there with clear line of sight? That roof has a clear line of sight to the former president. Why didn't you put a Secret Service counter sniper there?
The Secret Service's counter sniper role is to neutralize those threats that are looking in on us from where the protectee is, not necessarily
You think maybe you might want to revise that protocol in light of what happened here?
They were protecting the principal, and I think
the principal got shot.
I understand that, sir.
So do you think you might want to revise the protocol? Let me ask you this. Who was the lead site agent who made the decision to leave the AGR building completely outside of the security perimeter? Who was that?
Senator, I cannot give you that name. This person is operational. They're still doing investigations. They're still doing protective visits.
Have they been relieved of duty?
Senator, they have not been relieved of duty.
I know their name, by the way. Why have they not been relieved of duty?
They are still cooperating, not only being interviewed by the FBI, but also by our Office of Professional Responsibility. And we will let the facts of the mission assurance and any further investigations play out.
Isn't the fact that a former president was shot, that a good American is dead, that other Americans were critically wounded, isn't that enough mission failure for you to say that the person who decided that that building should not be in the security perimeter probably ought to be stepped down?
Senator, I think you're using the word decided, and I think we need to allow the investigation play out to include.
So who did make the decision then? If it wasn't the lead site agent, who made the decision not to put that in the security perimeter?
Senator, you're zeroing in on one particular agent. I want to find out exactly what was the entire decision process. So I think I want to be neutral and make sure that we get to the bottom of it and interview everybody in order to determine if there was more than one person who perhaps exercised bad judgment.
Well, sure. My question is, why don't you relieve everybody of duty who made bad judgment? So yeah, you're right, I am zeroing in on somebody. I'm trying to find somebody who's accountable here.
And
you're telling me that the person who made the decision not to include this in the perimeter has not been relieved of duty? What about the person who's in charge of the interoperability of radio frequencies between local law enforcement and Secret Service? Has that person been relieved of duty?
No, Senator, because interoperability is a challenge, is a greater challenge than just one person. On that day, we had a counterpart system. It failed
As the person
spectacularly.
who made the decision to send Donald Trump onto stage knowing that you had a security situation, has that person been relieved of duty?
No, sir, they haven't.
Has the person who decided not to pull the former president off of stage when you knew that, in your words, the locals were working a serious security situation, has that person been relieved of duty?
No, sir. Again, I refer you back to my original answer that we are investigating this through a mission assurance. And as opposed to zeroing in on one
What more do you
or
need
two
to
individuals,
investigate
we want
to
find out
know
exactly what the
What more do you
decision-making
need to
process
investigate
was.
to know that there were critical enough failures that some individuals ought to be held accountable? I mean, what more do you need to know?
What I need to know is exactly what happened, and I need my investigators to do their job. And I cannot.
people didn't do their
I cannot
jobs.
put my thumb on the scale. Otherwise,
What do you mean put your thumb on
the
the scale?
objective. You're asking me, Senator, to completely make a rush to judgment about somebody failing. I acknowledge this was a failure of the
Is it
Secret
not
Service.
prima facie that somebody has failed? A former president was shot.
Sir, this could have been our Texas school book depository. I have lost sleep over that for the last 17 days,
Then
just like you
fire
have.
somebody to
And I will
hold
tell
them
you,
accountable.
Senator, I will tell you, Senator, that I will not rush to judgment, that people will be held accountable, and I will do so with integrity and not rush to judgment and put people
I can't believe
unfairly
that you
persecuted.
are unfairly persecuted.
Unfairly,
We've got people
sir,
who are
we
dead.
have to be able to have a proper investigation into this, Senator.
You said earlier that you've got to make sure that your protocols are followed, and unless there's a protocol violation, people wouldn't be disciplined. I would just say to you, I don't really care that much about your protocols. I think if your protocols don't provide for the fact that when a former president is shot, when an American is killed, when other rally-goers, innocent people who just showed up on the day, when they are shot at and critically wounded, if that isn't a protocol violation prima facie, you should revise your protocols.
Senator, I think this is where you and I agree. This was a failure, and we will get to the bottom of it.
Well, I hope you're going to do something about it. Let me ask you something else. The Real Clear Politics reports this morning that you were directly involved in denying additional security resources and personnel, including counter snipers, not just to this event, but over the last 2 years, that President Trump's team repeatedly asked for these additional resources, and you personally were involved in denying them. Is that true?
Senator, as I stated earlier, that is not true.
So you never denied any resources to former President Trump's team?
No, not me. No, sir.
And
Not
you weren't
personally.
involved in any of that? You
No,
were never
sir, I
involved
was
in the
not.
decision-making?
No, sir, I was not.
Let me ask you just one or two other things here quickly. Well, whistleblowers tell me that, in fact, law enforcement were stationed to be on that roof, and that law enforcement abandoned their post because it was too hot. Is that accurate?
Senator, I have heard that as well. Again, they posted up inside. And I think moving forward, as I said earlier, we're going to ensure that state and local counter snipers are on roofs.
But do you know if someone was supposed to be on the roof? Do you know if someone was in fact? That's what the whistleblowers tells me. That may or may not be accurate. Do you know that to be the fact? Was somebody posted to the roof, local law enforcement or whomever?
I do not know that to be a fact.
Well, can I ask you why you don't know that?
Again, Senator, we are looking at this, and they should have been on that roof. And the fact that they were in the building is something that I'm still trying to understand.
I just want to express my frustration, Director, that 17 days or whatever it's been, that whistleblowers are telling us more than you are, and you don't know, you haven't ascertained if there was supposed to be law enforcement on the roof. That seems like a pretty basic fact. I'm also told that local law enforcement suppliers offered the Secret Service drones, and you declined them. Is that true?
So Senator, one, I've been very transparent and forthcoming.
Your agency has not been transparent and forthcoming, so please, let's not go there.
I have been forthcoming, sir.
That remains to be seen. You've been on the job a few days. So far, you've fired nobody. Now, the drones.
Thank you,
Were
sir.
you offered drones?
Senator
So there
Hawley.
was an offer to fly a drone on that day.
And why did you deny it?
Again, I think the ability of local law enforcement to provide an asset, we probably should have taken them up on it if it was offered.
Senator Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Rowe, thank you for being here. I agree with what you said at the outset, that the individual Secret Service agents demonstrated remarkable personal courage, putting their bodies in between the line of sight of the shooter and the president. That being said, the bravery of the line agents is quite different from the decisions of Secret Service leadership. Secret Service leadership committed catastrophic security failures, indeed the worst security failures for the Secret Service since 1981, since the attempted assassination of President Ronald Reagan. It is incumbent upon this committee to determine why those security failures happened. Just after the shooting, Secret Service put out an official statement from your spokesperson that says there's an untrue assertion that a member of the former president's team requested additional security resources and that those were rebuffed. This is absolutely false. In fact, we added protective resources and technology and capabilities as part of the increased campaign travel tempo. Was this tweet accurate?
With respect to Butler, Pennsylvania, it is accurate, sir.
It is accurate that the Trump team had not asked for additional security and had not been rebuffed.
If you're talking about Butler, Pennsylvania, all assets requested were approved. If you're talking about the media reporting of assets requested, there were times when assets were unavailable and not able to be filled, and those gaps were staffed with state and local law enforcement tactical assets.
So I'm reading from the Washington Post, July 20th, 2024. Secret Service said to have denied requests for more security at Trump events. The opening paragraph, top officials of the U.S. Secret Service repeatedly denied requests for additional resources and personnel sought by Donald Trump's security detail in the 2 years leading up to his attempted assassination, according to 4 people familiar with the requests. Is that right, that repeatedly the Trump detail asked for more resources and repeatedly Secret Service leadership turned that down?
That is not accurate, Senator. Assets are requested. There's a process that is made. And
how many requests did the Trump team or the Trump detail ask for?
I can get you that number in a queue.
You don't know now.
So I can speak to the ones that were reported in the Washington Post, and we can go through them if you like.
But you don't know how many requests there were.
In general, how many requests since 2021 that the former Trump detail has made a request for assets?
You've had 2 weeks. You had a spokesperson put something out that is false on its face. By the way, did you approve this statement when it went out?
I don't know if I did or didn't, Senator.
Has this spokesperson, is he still employed? Does he still have a job?
He is still employed, Senator.
So he lied on behalf of the Secret Service. He still has a job. Did your predecessor, the former director, did she approve this statement?
Senator, our comms team, they send out statements. They do deconflict them and they put them out.
Did she approve this statement?
I don't know if she did or did not, Senator.
And you don't know if you did either?
I don't recall approving it, Senator.
Will you commit to provide this committee in writing every written request for additional resources from the Trump campaign or the Trump detail and every response from Secret Service?
Senator, I will commit to providing responses and getting you the information that you are seeking.
Let me ask you something. And who makes the decision to deny those requests? Did you make that decision?
Which requests? Are you talking about the ones that were in the
Any of
Washington
them.
Post?
Yes.
So the process, sir, is that a detail will make a request for either staffing, technical assets, that is handled between the field office and the detail. It goes up to a logistics office between our
Okay,
office
so
of
there's a bureaucracy. Is there a decision maker?
It's not a bureaucracy, Senator.
Give me
It's
the
a
person
process.
that's a decision maker. Is there one?
Senator, it's a conversation. It's not just an absolute yay or nay.
So let me tell you what I believe. I believe that the Secret Service leadership made a political decision to deny these requests. And I think the Biden administration has been suffused with partisan politics. Did the same person who denied the request for additional security to President Trump also repeatedly deny the request for security to Robert F. Kennedy Jr., whose father was murdered by an assassin and whose uncle was murdered by an assassin? Did the same person make that decision?
Senator, what I will tell you is that Secret Service agents are not political.
Okay, you're not answering my question. But you know what? Leadership appointed by the president, leadership appointed by the president is political. I have a simple question, yes or no. Did the same person deny the Trump request that also denied the RFK request? That's a yes or no question.
Senator, that is not a yes or no question. One, there is a process for a candidate nominee to receive protection.
Does the buck stop anywhere? Does the buck stop anywhere?
Bipartisan process that the Hill participates in.
It's a bicameral, bipartisan process. What cameral?
For a candidate,
you are not a Congress. You don't have a cameral.
Mr. Kennedy submitted a request that was referred over to the CPAC.
Okay, you're refusing to answer the question. Let me ask, because the failures on that day were catastrophic. By the way, is it true that on the day of the Butler event that Secret Service transferred agent from President Trump to the First Lady?
No, sir, that's not true.
That's been widely reported.
It's not true. There was one airport agent that actually went on the manpower request for the Trump detail. They handled the arrival at the airport for the First Lady.
What was the relative size of the Trump detail compared to the detail that is assigned to the President or the First Lady?
Senator, the former president travels with a full shift, just like the president.
What's so the exact same size? Is that your testimony that President Trump had the same size detail that President Biden has?
On the day of in Butler, the agents surrounding him, it is the same number of agents surrounding the president today. There is a difference between a sitting president who also not only
Hold on, you're using president in a way that is not clear. Is it your testimony that in Butler, Pennsylvania, Donald Trump had the same number of agents protecting him that Joe Biden has at a comparable event?
I'm telling you the shift, the close protection shift surrounding.
That's a yes
what
or
you
no.
asked me, Senator, and I'm trying to answer it.
You are not answering it. Is it the same number of agents or not?
Senator, there is a difference between the sitting president of the United States.
Then what's the difference?
The difference?
2x, 3x, 5x,
National
10x?
Command Authority to launch a nuclear strike, sir.
I'm not
there are other assets
how many more
travel
agents?
with the president that the former president will
you are
not get.
refusing to
but
answer
the number
straight.
of Secret Service
Sir,
agents protecting him.
Stop interrupting me.
Go ahead,
You
Senator.
are refusing to answer clear and direct questions. I am asking the relative difference in the number of agents between those assigned to Donald Trump and those assigned to Joe Biden. I'm not asking why you assign more to Joe Biden. I'm asking, is the difference, is it 2x? Is it 3x? Is it 5x? Is it 10x?
Senator, I will get you that number so you can see it with your own eyes.
Senator Marshall, you're recognized for your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Rowe, there was probably 10 buildings within sniper range of President Trump on that afternoon. Why was the building being used by the sniper not in the security zone?
That's a question that I've asked, Senator. There was a decision that we were going to construct the site and it was going to maintain within the Butler Farm site, Butler Farm Show site. That building, that AGR, was right on the curtilage of our outer perimeter. And it's something that again, having been there and walked it, I had a hard time understanding.
So there's no protocol that says anything within 300, 500 yards, direct line of the president, should be in or out of the security zone. There's not a protocol that describes that.
So, Senator, what we try to do is we try to either control the high ground or mitigate line of sight concerns.
Okay. You've stated that on multiple occasions, President Trump's team was denied more of a detail, more assets. Who denies that? Who is the person that denies that, generally speaking?
So, Senator, there's a process. Again, there's a conversation had with the detail.
There's got to be a buck stopping. There's got to be someone. Who is the person? Is it a level within the D.C. agency? Is it someone in the Pittsburgh office? Who denies this?
It has nothing to do with the Pittsburgh office,
Okay.
sir. It is a conversation between not only the detail, the field office, but also.
I don't want to know the conversation. I want to know who makes the decision.
The decision, sir, is it's our process between the Office of Protective Operations and the Office of Investigations.
Is there a title for this position?
It is called we affectionately call it the War Room, and it's where all of our logistics files into.
So it's a room that makes the decision.
It is a staffing and assignments officer.
Okay, is the Secret Service required to do a briefing with all entities of law enforcement involved in the event of the days leading up to the event and the day of the event?
We do a police meeting, sir, where we start the initial
So it's required.
process.
Is it required? Is it part of your standard operating procedure?
The police meeting is what initiates the advance, and that is what is required.
Was this meeting held on that day?
The police meeting took place on the days prior to that.
Do you have documents of that meeting was actually happened?
If we do, sir, I will get them to you.
But you're saying that it did not happen on the day of the event?
So I think what you're referring to is a briefing that the state and locals would have done with themselves. We did a briefing with our own folks. They briefed.
When did you, did your people meet with local law enforcement the day of the assassination attempt?
Yes.
Okay, and you realize that the local law enforcement says no, that meeting never happened, and that's why we need to get these people in to talk to us, and this is why the FBI needs to be speaking up sooner than later and say that meeting did or didn't happen. Surely there's some type of documentation of that meeting one way or the other. Is there documentation of that meeting?
So, Senator, I can tell you that what you're referring to is the counter-sniper team seconded to Butler ESU. Our personnel met with the team lead from Butler ESU, and they discussed areas of concern, areas of responsibility, and that did in fact happen at the site on that day.
Director, I think you would agree with me that there were multiple individual and institutional failures the day of this assassination attempt. You have a $3 billion budget. You're still 2,000 employees short. And in 2022, the Secret Service had a 48% departure rate. That tells me you either have a cultural problem or just gross incompetence. Which one is it?
So, Senator, I would challenge that 48% departure rate. Let me get you some statistics that we have. It is not 48%.
But go back to the multiple failures that we saw on an individual basis as long as systemic. I think it proves that there's either incompetence or some type of a cultural problem within the SS.
So, Senator, I know you're not calling our workforce incompetent, and I know we do not have a cultural problem. If anything, we are dedicated to making sure that we don't have mission failure. And let me get you the hiring numbers that we have, because I think you will actually see that, no, we've actually done very well fairly recently with trying to make sure that we have the numbers that we need. Of course, we need more people. Everybody does. But let me get you those numbers, and I think let your own eyes
Would you
see.
also disagree with me when it's reported that almost 50% of the rank and file officers don't trust leadership within the Secret Service?
Senator, I think it's the right of every worker to talk bad about their boss.
Thank you. I yield back.
Senator Hirona, you're recognized for your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Clearly, there is a lot that the Secret Service has to answer for in this stunning security failure. But I do want to follow up on Mr. Abate's testimony that an online profile of the shooter may have been found, and you said it contains anti-Semitic and anti-immigrant postings. Can you elaborate? Have you found anything further in the shooter's profile?
Senator, this was just discovered, as I mentioned, and it's being closely analyzed right now. We need to verify that it is, in fact, that it belonged to the now deceased shooter and that he made these comments. So that's why I felt it important in the interest of transparency to share that here, but add the caveat that we still have a lot of work to do, which we're working on quickly to determine that. It's of importance, I think, because if it is, in fact, the shooter that posted these comments, it's the first real indication where he's expressing what are described as extremist views and talking about political violence.
I take it that once you determine that it was in fact the shooter who posted these kinds of comments, that you will let the public know as well as this committee?
Absolutely, Senator.
I think, in fact, it is very important that many of the perpetrators of mass shootings, et cetera, have these kinds of postings online that are very anti-immigrant, anti-Semitic, anti-everything. And it is really important as we determine the kind of profile for many of these shooters that we understand how critical it is that we are careful, how critically important it is that people are careful about what they're posting online, the misinformation, disinformation, everything else along those lines. This is for Mr. Abate once again. What kind of firearm, what kind of weapon did Crooks use in the assassination attempt?
This was an AR-15 style rifle manufactured by a company named Panther Arms.
And once again, many of the persons involved in these kinds of mass shootings use this particular kind of weapon. We know from similar hearings that the Judiciary Committee has had that we are a nation awash in guns. In your view, shouldn't we be doing more to prevent the easy accessibility of these kinds of firearms in our country?
Senator, we're focused on collecting the facts here, and I'm not going to comment on something like that.
Well, I know that that there is a hesitancy to ask about firearms and all of that, and I should think that as a law enforcement person that you probably have some opinions along those lines, but you don't want to articulate what to many people in our country. There's a causal factor here, the easy accessibility of guns. And I want to ask that question because I think it's important that the American people understand that, we are a nation that is awash in guns, and we have more mass shootings than any other country, and yet we have been unable to pass the kind of laws that prevent these kinds of firearms to be easily available, that we have not done enough to promote gun safety in our country. And Mr. Chairman, I wanted to articulate that as the elephant in the room that nobody wants to address, including apparently our law enforcement officers. I am disappointed in that, but obviously we have a work to do to create a much safer environment and to prevent persons who have these kinds of ideological perspectives and who are, I would say, who have these kinds of profiles to have such easy accessibility to the kind of firearms that can cause mass death and destruction. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Langford, recognized for your questions.
Chairman, thank you. Thank you to both of you for the testimony today. Director Rowe, future Vice President J.D. Vance was in my state this past week in Oklahoma City. I talked with some of the Secret Service folks that are there. They're doing a terrific job. I got a chance to be able to thank them personally for the tasks they're doing, and I know the Oklahoma folks in Secret Service, and they're very dedicated, incredibly sharp people on that team. So I know this is a challenge to all Secret Service. This is something every Secret Service agent wakes up every single day and wants to avoid. So please continue to be able to pass on our gratitude for the work they do every single day and for what's happening out there.
I will,
So
sir.
I appreciate that. Mr. Bate, I want to ask you about some of the interviews that have happened. Y'all have done more than 400 interviews at this point. For the counter sniper team that was local law enforcement that was on the second floor overlooking that rooftop, have they been interviewed at this point?
Yes, Senator, I believe that each of them have been interviewed.
Do you know offhand if they were at their post at that time, able to look across that? They were at that post at some times. Do we know they were at that post at 6:08 to 6:11?
My understanding, and I want to be fair, I have not read the reports directly, but I've been briefed on some of it. They were at times during the time frame we're talking about here on post within the AGR building. And I do believe, but I would want to confirm this at some point, one or more did venture out in an effort to locate and isolate the.
We understand from the timeline that they were also looking for this individual that was suspicious, that they had left that post to be able to try to look for him on the ground at different points to try to be able to see if they could get a different perspective. What we're trying to figure out is during that time period that he actually climbed on the roof, assembled a firearm or took a firearm with him or picked one up, whatever it might have been there, that they were able to actually see him if they were able to look left, as been acknowledged in the photos that are up there.
Senator, I don't know the exact timing and the movements of each officer that was out there, but what I would derive from it is they were all focused on locating the shooter,
Right.
the suspicious person at the time. And then, as we've all seen, the one officer attempted to get on the roof directly. There were efforts going on in those final minutes
Right.
on the video to try to get to this person.
We've got one officer being boosted up by another officer to
Yes.
look up on the roof because people on the ground had said there's someone up there and they have a gun that's crawling on that roof. And so they climbed up to be able to see it. He turned around with a rifle. He came down. And then at that point, he gets on the local radio that he has and says there's someone on the roof with a gun. Is that correct?
Yes, Senator, I believe that that's accurate.
So what's the rest of the radio communication? We've heard that first call in. We know it's about 30 seconds from the time he called in till the actual first shot rang out. What else was discussed on the radio during that 30-second time period?
Senator, we have the radio communications. The local radio communications were recorded and captured, and we do have that as part of the investigation. The key points to me, that local officer communicating that he sees the individuals, he's armed, that's at about 6:11 in some seconds, I think it's 3 seconds, and then he identifies it as a long gun at about 6:11 and 11 seconds. And the shots, which all happen quickly together, I believe happen within probably 30 seconds.
So we're talking about over the radio because there's a command center there
Yes.
where all radios, including the local, as they're all being listened to try to be able to review. There's a statement that has the word gun in it that's coming out across that radio. We only know that first communication. We don't know what came back and forth on that. We'd like to get transcripts of that conversation that was done in local law enforcement. But coming into that command center, there's also the word gun coming through one of the radio frequencies. I would think that would be communicated pretty quickly to everybody across the spectrum. 30 seconds is not long, but that's an NFL play plus a huddle plus the next play. I mean,
Yes,
that's quite a bit of time still to be able to respond. When Secret Service moved to be able to protect the president once the first shots were fired, within 2 seconds, they're gathered around him. So trying to be able to figure out where the word gun got lost in radio communication here and what else was said.
Certainly, we will share the communications with you and the committees, Senator. I will note, just from my notes, there was effort within those minutes and seconds, once the gun was announced, there's other communications where the local police are talking about deploying a QRF and responding, and that they've got the building surrounded. So it's not an avoid. I don't want to give you the misimpression.
Right, I understand, but typically, I would assume for Secret Service, if they hear over the radio over something gun, they're moving to be able to protect the detailee, the person they're protecting at that point, the protectee, that they're moving pretty quickly at that point if that's what's actually coming out. And so that's what I'm trying to be able to figure out, how that didn't get communicated out to the people that were directly in front of the former president at that point. And the last question I'd have, I only have a second left, is just, was there any overhead drone? We've talked about counter drone, but any visibility that Secret Service had to be able to see the field and all the operation in their own ability?
No, sir. And as was asked by another senator earlier, it appears that there was an offer by a state or local agency to fly a drone on our behalf, and I'm getting to the bottom as to why we turned that down.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Kennedy, you're recognized for your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Abate, am I saying your name right?
Yes, Senator, thank you.
You are the Deputy Director of the FBI, is that correct?
Yes, Senator.
Is there any doubt in your mind or in the collective mind of the FBI that President Trump was shot in the ear by a bullet fired by the assassin crooks?
Senator, there is absolutely no doubt in the FBI's mind
It
whether former President Trump was hit with a bullet and wounded in the ear. No doubt, there never has been.
Okay.
I've been part of this investigation since the very beginning, and that has never been raised.
You're sure?
Yes.
It wasn't a space laser.
No.
It wasn't a murder hornet.
Absolutely not.
It wasn't Sasquatch.
No, Senator.
It was a bullet.
It was a bullet, Senator. 100%.
fired by crooks
Yes, sir.
that hit President Trump in the ear and almost killed him.
100%, Senator.
Okay, glad we cleared that up. I don't want to get off the subject here. Did the FBI just settle 2 lawsuits, one wholly, one in part, in which the FBI agreed to give Peter Strzok $1.2 million and Ms. Lisa Page $800,000?
It's my understanding, Senator, that the Department of Justice was involved in that, not the FBI.
The FBI had nothing to do with it?
There may have been consultation with our general counsel's office, but
Does the FBI have to sign off on it?
I don't know the answer to that. I don't believe so, but I would want to confirm that.
I would like you to, this would be the same Lisa Page who said to Mr. Strzok, quote, "Trump's not ever going to become president, right? Right?" To which Mr. Strzok said, quote, "No, he won't. We will stop it." That's the Peter Strzok and Lisa Page I'm talking about. I need to know if the FBI signed off on this lawsuit.
We will
on
get
this
that
settlement.
answer for you, Senator.
And then I need to know who signed off on it. Did you sign off on it?
I absolutely did not and would never sign off on something
Did
like
Chris
that.
Wray sign off on it, the settlement?
I don't believe he did,
Okay. Did you don't know what?
nor do I think he would have.
You need to let me know who signed off on this, if anyone at the FBI. So it was Merrick Garland who agreed to do this, is that right?
I don't, Senator, I do not know.
Well, hell,
who signed
somebody
off
had
on
to
that.
agree to it. I've settled a lawsuit before. The client's got to agree to it. You're the client. All right.
Understood. I'm gonna direct in to the Department of Justice to
All
answer
right.
those
Get
questions.
me
That's-
that information if you would. Mr. Rowe, help me understand this. The assassin Crooks fired his first shot, as I understand it, at 6:12 p.m. He was about 150 yards away. It's been reported that the snipers, the government snipers, saw him on the roof 20 minutes before. Not 2 minutes, 20 minutes before. Is that correct?
Senator, that's first time I'm hearing this. That is not correct based on the information I have right now, sir.
Well, when did the FBI snipers see him on the roof?
Just Secret Service sniper, sir. I mean,
I'm sorry,
That-
you're right.
that's an
Secret
insult,
Service
sir.
sniper.
No, I'm just kidding.
I understand, I apologize. When did the Secret Service snipers, one of whom ultimately shot the assassin Crooks, first see him on that roof?
So, sir, immediately upon the shots being fired, our snipers,
I know that, but when did they first see him? You got a guy lying on a roof.
yeah,
You got snipers in an elevated position. They can look down on the roof. You got the guy lying there with a gun pointed at the former president of the United States. And I'm just, and they shot him. Good for them. He's now dead as Woodrow Wilson, and that's a good thing. I'm sorry. God forgive me, but it's a good thing. But when did the snipers first see him?
as soon as he presented himself as a target and a threat to the president, sir.
And when was that?
He fires initially a volley, I believe it was 3 shots.
No, he fired at 6:12 p.m.
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's the first shot.
So within 15.5 seconds of the
Here's
first
what-
shot,
he-
he's
Here's what
neutralized.
people are asking.
Yes, sir.
He was up, Crooks was up there. The snipers at some point saw him,
Yes, sir.
our snipers, because they killed him.
Yes, sir.
When did they first see him? It has been reported repeatedly that the snipers first saw him 20 minutes before. That's more than a quarter in an NFL football game.
Yes, sir.
You don't know the answer?
So
to
I do
that?
know the answer, sir. I'm telling you that,
What is the answer?
no,
When
they did not see him. They only
They
saw him.
never saw him?
No, sir.
Well,
They did not.
how could they not see the guy? How could they not see him? They're in an elevated position. They're checking rooftops. They're looking around. There's two government snipers. How could they not see him? There he was, big as Dallas, lying there with a gun pointed at the president. How could they not see him?
I believe he was obscured by that roof, sir. He did not pop up.
The roof is flat with ridges.
He's below the line where they would have seen him, sir. There is he did have concealment. I'm not going to say it's cover. He did have concealment, and then ultimately gets into firing position and fires. And within 15.5 seconds of his first shot, he's neutralized.
I've gone way over. You gentlemen need to answer these questions. Mr. Deputy Director, get me that information about those lawsuits.
Senator Rosen, you're recognized for your questions.
Thank you, Chair Peters, and Ranking Member Paul for holding this important hearing on the attempted assassination of former President Trump. I am grateful for everyone's service and dedication. However, it's critical that this committee get to the bottom of what happened that day so that we can prevent any future catastrophic security failures and ensure that nothing like this happens again. And so, Director Rowe, given that the event took place in a rural area, we've talked a lot about connectivity issues. Was law enforcement at a disadvantage due to a lack of or limited connectivity? And why has the Secret Service not adopted a dedicated satellite-enabled Wi-Fi connection, which would facilitate integrated communication, enable device connectivity to include drones, and allowing for the sharing of real-time intelligence?
So, Senator, thank you for that question. So, based on what I've seen, that radio connectivity, cellular was an issue that day. With respect to the satellite broadband, that is something that I've tasked our CIO, and then we're getting some support from the Department of Homeland Security on. So we will start to leverage whatever asset we have to ensure that connectivity.
Well, I can tell you that we have those SEER ratings in Homeland Security, those special event ratings that we have for things like the Super Bowl. We have it a lot in Las Vegas, and they do bring these mobile units to be sure that we have all the dedicated Wi-Fi cell service and integration that is absolutely necessary for securing a huge event. And so I look forward to hearing about that. Thank you. I want to talk a little bit about intelligence for lone wolf actors, because although we have not been made aware of any specific intelligence the Secret Service or others had in the shooter before the event, we do know that we have intel on Iranian threats against the former president. And so again, Acting Director Rowe, could you talk to us about how you utilize intelligence collection as a way of mitigating threats from state actors like Iran compared to what you do, compared to lone wolf actors, what it seems to be like the attempted assassin that we have here in Crooks. And so, and what are the specific challenges with the intelligence collection as a mitigation tool against lone wolf actors versus state actors?
So Senator, first let me preface by saying the Secret Service is not a member of the intelligence community. However, we are their biggest consumers of information, and we receive that information regularly, especially as it pertains to our protective mission and the people that we protect. We have embeds with the FBI through their National Joint Terrorism Task Forces. Our agents are basically embeds and are able to not only receive information, but also follow up on investigations that may have a nexus or a direction of interest towards one of our protectees. We have an excellent working relationship with the FBI. We have an excellent working relationship with the intelligence community. We are not collectors. We are consumers of finished analytic products that the intelligence community of the FBI produces. We ingest them, and then we use that to adjust our protective posture. And we do this daily, weekly, all of the time. And it's not only for protective, for protectees, but also the events and sites that we protect on a permanent or temporary basis. With respect to largely a lot of the people that come to our attention, and in the case of the assailant, you know, to me, as I overlay him over top of, say, John Hinckley, who tried to shoot President Reagan, I see an individual based on information that I have now, some of the great work that the FBI has done. We have an individual who's a loner. We have an individual who was focused on Donald Trump and Joe Biden. Hinckley traveled the 80 campaign, and we know that he followed President Carter. It just, on March of '81, he happened to show up in Washington, D.C., and he saw an opportunity to try to attack President Reagan. So when it comes to the Secret Service, and 1981 was a watershed moment for us. We have people that are, for whatever reason, fixated on carrying out an attack against the President of the United States or one of our protectees. And in this instance, you have the assailant who was a loner. Obviously, he was researching. He had researched the Democratic National Convention. He had researched and Googled or used a search engine about the president, the former president. And so I think he had moved towards an idea that he was going to try to do something. And so when I look at this, we don't have a challenge with the FBI or the intelligence community. I think what we always try to wrestle with is trying to line up and see people as they're starting to head down a pathway towards violence. And it's something that we have spent a lot of time and resources in with our National Threat Assessment Center to try to gain a better understanding so that we can help our agents in the field as they're doing these protective intelligence cases and these investigations to be able to make a determination, is somebody genuinely a threat, or do they need mental health, or do they need some other type of service?
Thank you. I appreciate that. My time's over. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Cotton, you're recognized for your questions.
At the outset, I want to express, as many members have, as President Trump did, the admiration and respect for the bravery and skill of the officers who were on site that day, Secret Service officers, as well as all the local law enforcement. As it happened, my 9-year-old son was watching with me that afternoon, and it was hard to get him to turn away from it. And he asked who all those men and women were who jumped on Mr. Trump. And I said, in layman's terms, those are his bodyguards. And he said, what are they doing? I said, they're protecting him from a bullet. And he said, actually? And I said, yes. He said, for real? And I said, yes. And it was hard for him to process that. But as a reminder, I told him that there are men and women in the Secret Service and law enforcement and the military who are willing to die for our country. And it's an important lesson, I think, that everyone should take away from this, that you had very brave men and women on the ground there who were doing their job to protect this country, to protect a former president and a nominee for president, as they do every day for so many other protectees. Obviously, there were failures in the planning and preparation for this event. Mr. Rowe, we've heard that the shooter had a golf rangefinder. Was that not on the list of prohibited items at an event like this? Currently, it is not on the list of prohibitive items, but we're going to make that change, Senator. John Kennedy can't get into an LSU football game with a flask.
Yeah, I can.
Well, he probably can, but he's not supposed to. It just seems like common sense that you don't need a laser rangefinder at an event like this. And it feels like that a lot of that was just the lack of common sense being exercised. Are officers not empowered on the front line to use common sense to say, like, if a guy has a laser rangefinder, he should be detained, or at least stopped, and that's why he's carrying it around. If you have a building like this that's not secure from 150 meters away, someone, even the front line, lowest level, most junior officer, should be able to kind of like send up the red flag immediately and say, like, we need to halt everything right now and figure out what the hell is going on. I mean, do officers not feel empowered to use that kind of common sense?
I would hope they would, Senator. I can tell you from our uniform division officers that run our magnetometer screening, they do a tremendous job. And even though something may or may not be on the prohibitive items list, they are well trained and they do exercise that good common sense.
And you want this is an important message. Okay, I want every one of your officers all around the country to hear that their acting director wants them to exercise common sense. It doesn't have to be policy or protocol or procedure. They should exercise common sense. Thank you for that. So it was reported right before Ms. Cheadle's hearing last week that, in fact, President Trump's detail had requested more resources and those had been denied. She said that she did not deny those resources. You've testified this morning that you did not either. So who did? I mean, the Secret Service is not the post office. It's not this vast bureaucracy.
Right.
Like, I'm not surprised to hear that you knew the counter sniper. It's a small agency and you have a lot of career officers. Like, surely you've gotten to the bottom by now of on whose desk this request landed and who denied it.
So, Senator, sometimes when they make a request, they may not have the asset available. For example, there may be, instead of, the detail may say, hey, we want 15 magnetometers. What we'll look at it based on what the event size, we'll say, hey, listen, we're going to send 10 based on our protocols of screening so many. We have a flow rate of how many people we can put through. When it comes to a counter sniper or something like that, because I know that's been the subject of some media reporting where they have requested counter snipers. We do have a finite number of counter snipers. And so what we try to do is if we cannot fill that asset, and that's where we'll say, hey, we can't fill this assignment. However, through the field office, they will use local law enforcement resources. And so in those situations, for example, in the one that has been the subject of a lot of reporting with Pickens, South Carolina, they in fact did use local assets to be able to do that. And there were 3 counter sniper teams. One of them was formerly with the Secret Service Uniform Division. And so they actually used the same practices that we use. So it's not that there was a drop in the capability. They actually used the best practices that we would use. So the asset may be denied by Secret Service between the war room and that conversation with the detail in the field, but that doesn't equate to a vulnerability or a gap.
Okay, one final question about the Iran threat. As you know, Iran made credible threats against several former Trump administration officials, many of whom still have government-provided security details to this day. Ms. Cheadle removed Secret Service protection from Robert O'Brien last year. Were you involved in that decision?
So, Senator, he was a memorandum protectee, meaning that the president authorized protection for him. We do not weigh in on who gets protection.
Why, so you're still protecting some others. I won't reveal their names. You are still protecting others, and other personal security offices in the federal government are protecting others. Other officials don't reveal their names. Like who made the decision that Robert O'Brien no longer needed a security detail, despite Iran's ongoing credible threats?
So I can tell you, sir, it wasn't the Secret Service. We don't factor into that decision.
Can you take a look at why that happened now that you're in charge and consider the possibility that he might still need that protection, given all of his counterparts in the Trump administration still have protection?
I will do so, Senator.
Go ahead.
You go ahead. Go ahead.
I would have said, like, again, I'm not going to reveal the protective details, but I'm pretty confident that the agency can get this done. And I think it needs to get done if you look at the kind of ongoing threats that he and all these others face.
Yeah, I will, sir.
Despite all the resource constraints we talked about today, he's not the President of the United States. He doesn't have an 18-car motorcade, nor do any of the others. I think he needs that protective detail. And now that you're in charge, I'm asking you to take a new look at that and also talk to your supervisors inside the department about whether you can spare just that small, limited amount of resources, okay?
Senator Welch, you're recognized for your question.
I will, sir.
Thank you very much. You know, there's, first of all, thank you both for the tremendous work you do and for all the folks behind you and under you. So thank you for that. I kind of want to follow up a little bit on Senator Cotton. You know, there's 3 issues that have been raised. One is the selection of who gets protection, and you've addressed that just now. The other is whether it's a budget issue, which I don't necessarily think it is. But then there's the operational question. Was this an operational failure? And it appears to me that's where the focus should be. And one of the issues on the operations is the capacity of people who are part of the team, both Secret Service and also the local law enforcement, their capacity to act on what they see. And this is what Senator Cotton, I think, was talking about with common sense. You know, you mentioned that the sniper was authorized immediately to act. He wasn't checking in with anyone, right? And he took out the shooter as quickly as he could. But according to the timeline, you had local law enforcement captured 2 photographs of the shooter at 5:10. At 5:32, local law enforcement officers spot a suspicious person who turned out to be the shooter with a phone and a rangefinder. At 5:46, the alert was so significant that snipers text photo of the shooter from where he was initially spotted to the USS lead sniper. I mean, how is it that where you had these experienced law enforcement people who understood the gravity of the responsibility of protecting the presidential candidate, the former president, none of these actionable observations resulted in action? I'll direct that first to you, Deputy Director Abate.
Thank you, Senator. From the FBI standpoint, we're simply collecting the facts. We've interviewed most of the officers. Now we'll end up interviewing all of them.
Okay, well, good. I was Assistant Director or Acting Director Rowe.
So on that, Senator, I think there was a sense of this guy is standing out, and that's why he came to the attention of local law enforcement.
No, I get that. That's my point.
Right.
He did stand out.
Correct.
But nothing happened. I
Well,
mean,
they
there were alerts,
There were
but there
alerts.
was like, you've got somebody suspicious. Why didn't somebody go interact with the suspicious person, like right away?
And they were attempting to locate him. I can't answer that question as to why, if they took a picture of him and they thought he was unusual, suspicious, not acting normal, why there wasn't. And I think, again, there was probably an assumption on the part of that officer that took that picture that, oh, some uniform or somebody will go eventually and walk up to this.
Well, see, that's what seems like an operational failure. Somebody else will do it. So is the responsibility of an officer to alert some other officer that they think somebody might be suspicious, or the first officer who sees a suspicious person can take the next step to actually engage that person or talk to someone very, very close to it and say, engage that person? And this guy was wandering around for quite a while.
He was. I can't put myself in the mind of that officer.
I'm not asking you to do that. I'm asking, this is operationally, how does the process work? Okay, so that is the job of the leaders as opposed to the officers. Are they empowered to act immediately upon the observation of someone who looks very suspicious, particularly when they've got the rangefinder, they're in a place where it really wasn't about seeing the rally. It was, as we see, it was a place where you get a good view of former President Trump. I mean, that is a leadership issue, right?
So, Senator, that officer didn't work for me. That was a state and local officer that made that observation, took that picture. So I can tell you from the Secret Service perspective, and we do this routinely, is that when people come to our attention, we locate them, we go up, we do a field interview, or we try to do a consensual encounter.
That's the operational thing I'm talking about. If you do it within Secret Service, you all are in charge. And you are relying on local law enforcement assets, those folks, and they did their job here up to a point where they identified this person, passed information along, but nobody acted. The empowerment to that local officer, I would think, has to come, be transmitted through the Secret Service, maybe in the earlier briefings, but, you know, where you say, you know, folks, you see somebody suspicious, you engage that suspicious person.
I don't disagree, Senator, and it goes back to my comments at the beginning of the hearing that we need to be very direct to our local law enforcement counterparts so that they understand exactly what their expectations.
I yield back. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Tillis, you're recognized for your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Abate, Mr. Rowe, thank you for being here. Mr. Rowe, do you have a picture? I was watching your testimony earlier. Do you have a photograph of the vantage point from the Secret Service snipers?
I do. Let's see.
And there were two, is that correct?
Yes, sir, stage left and stage right.
Okay, and I don't know if you have a vantage point of both of them or not. I know you had one for the one who ultimately shot the...
That's the vantage point of the sniper who neutralized the assailant.
Okay, well, is it a similar vantage point for the other? Would they have also been impaired in terms of actually seeing him until he popped his head up?
So the sniper on the stage right side, Senator, they had an obstructive view because of that tree.
They had an obstructive view. Okay, so well, the one thing, discussion that I don't believe that a sniper saw someone on the roof 20 minutes before just doesn't make sense to me. It sounds like the one who took the shot probably saw him for the first time about a split second before he pulled the trigger. Is that?
That's my assessment, Senator.
I'm more, well, first off, I'd like to clarify the requests that have been made of a lot of people so that we get the information in a good form. I think it would be helpful, at least all the way back to, I think, November 5th of 2022, I believe, when President Trump announced that he was running for re-election. I think it'd be helpful if we could just get a matrix of any request for additional security, the resolution of that request. Was it honored? Was it denied? Was it downsized? If you could give us that, I think that that's going to be the best way versus giving us mounds and mounds of paper. If you can do that, I know you're looking at the same thing. I've heard from you that any subsequent requests for field requests are being honored. I believe that that's true. Is that your testimony?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. I'm more worried about the 24 to 30 seconds between the time I believe local law enforcement officer was hoisted on the shoulders of another police officer, saw a person armed less than 200 yards away from the president, who I believe jumped down. What happened in those 24 or 30 seconds? I mean, obviously, there's no such thing as a panic button. You know, the first thing you'd think is you hit panic, you cover the president, get him off stage. None of that happened. What happened? Is it just, did I hear a text message? What actually happened in the 30 seconds where a law enforcement officer knew that a gun was pointed in the direction of the president from a fairly short range? What actually did those folks who did have knowledge of exactly what was happening and could probably infer what was about to happen, what did they do? And Mr. Abate or Mr. Rowe, either one, based on your interviews.
Thank you, Senator. From the interviews, you know, the officers in the immediate vicinity were operating with urgency at that point to get to this person, but he was on the roof. The officer who had looked over the edge, based on what I've been told, the shooter turned toward him with the rifle. That's what the officer observed. So he was under threat himself in that second, so he had to retreat and step down and get back to the ground in order to protect himself and keep him safe from potential rifle fire. But once he got to the ground, along with the other officers, there were Butler County local officers, Pennsylvania State Police. They were moving around trying to find some way to get to this guy.
We've got an operational problem here because we had more than 20 seconds to have somehow cut through all the crap and the communications, whatever impediments there were, have to be removed. I mean, it's pretty clear to me. First off, that law enforcement officer, I love law enforcement. I wear the back of the blue pin every day. They do great work. Secret Service did phenomenal work on the stage. But they failed because their job is to protect the public. And they needed to put themselves in harm's way to stop him. Now, I'll let the interviews go through, but there was a massive failure. There were at least 2 law enforcement officers that knew a guy was about to pull the trigger at the president. And, you know, I'm just not really happy with the fact that we couldn't have communicated, covered President Trump, and tried to secure the situation. I'm going to let the investigation go through, but I think it's go forward. I think it's very important to point out that we can't let a scenario go in the future where 20 seconds can lapse when a law enforcement officer within 2 football fields of a former president of the United States has material knowledge that somebody's about to get shot at on stage, and we don't have instantaneous response. You know, in the old days, maybe you just shoot a gun in the air. I know for a lot of reasons why they didn't do that, but there had to be some way to actually diffuse that situation. It didn't happen on July the 13th. I just want to end by saying, Mr. Rowe, I think you've been forthcoming in your answers. I know you're frustrated. I've seen you twice now. You're clearly embarrassed by what happened. You don't think there's any reasonable explanation. And to my colleagues who are worried about communications, they should spend time in their local government and state legislatures to understand just how bad communication is between law enforcement and first responders. We need to invest in this infrastructure. That was also a part of the failure. But if you can please get to me and get to this committee a chronology of requests, accepted, denied, and the reasons for, I think that's going to be very helpful.
I will, Senator. Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Blackburn, you're recognized for your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to each of you for your patience and for being here today. Director Rowe, I want to come to you first because a counter sniper has decided to speak out about the culture at your agency, and I think it is very telling. And he sent an email, and I'm going to quote from that. If this agency needs to change, and if not now, when? The next assassination in 30 days? But here's what I want to talk with you about, because in this email, he says, and I'm quoting again, the motto of the USSS is CYA. And every supervisor is doing it now. That's the end of his quote. So you're the guy in charge. And you're one of those supervisors. You've been a career guy there at the Secret Service. The public has lost trust in the ability to execute the mission, to protect. And I want to know how you feel about the fact that employees in your agency are worried about covering their behind and not worried about protecting a former president.
Thank you, Senator. So I am hurt by that email, but not in the way you think I'm saying it. I'm hurt because my people are hurting right now. We need them.
Then why did somebody delete the email?
I'll get back to you on that,
The
Senator.
agency deleted the email.
But look, may I address your question?
Yes,
And
please.
I will get back to you as to
Please.
whether
Yes.
the email was deleted or not. My agency is hurting. Emotions are raw. I actually want to hear more from that UD officer, that technician. In his email, he referenced that he had spent time serving our nation as a United States Marine, that he is a 20-year professional of the Secret Service. I am committed to being a change agent, meaning I am committed to reviewing some of these things. I looked at the points in his email very quickly. I saw it as I was on my way over here this morning. I want to have further conversations, not only with him,
Let
but
me-
also the counter sniper unit supervisors.
If I may step back in, sir.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So you want to talk with him. What about other whistleblowers? What about this culture? Are you going to allow these whistleblowers to speak out? Because it is troublesome if somebody went into the server and deleted that email. And I would hope you will get to the bottom of that and be able to provide some answers. Because this is, as you have heard from both sides, this is a situation that cannot be allowed to happen again,
Yes, ma'am.
ever. Mr. Abate, and am I saying your name properly? We've heard it pronounced 3 different ways today in the hearing.
Abate, Senator.
Abate, okay.
Thank you.
You had mentioned a social media account that espoused anti-immigrant, anti-Semitic views, but you did not say what platform that was on and what the username was. And this is Crooks that we're discussing.
Yes, Senator, that's correct. I didn't want to comment on it because we haven't fully confirmed yet, and I thought that as soon as we confirm and certify,
Would
I
you
will
supply
provide that
that?
to you.
And
Absolutely.
also the age at which he had those feelings. And then we understand that the Gab account is pro-immigration, pro-lockdown, leftist views. Is that accurate?
I haven't seen it directly, but I believe from what I've been told, that is accurate. With the Gab account, we're also, though that's been publicly revealed through the CIO and other things, we're still working to certify and verify that that's his account also. But it does have differing points of view, it would appear.
Okay. And what age and how fresh is that Gab account?
The Gab account, based on my recollection, the comments in there or the messaging is from about 2021, I believe.
Okay. And the other preceded that? Maybe he was age 14?
Yes, Senator. The other account that we talked about was in the 2019-2020 timeframe, so it would have been in the couple years right before GAB
Right
messaging.
before that.
Yes.
Are there other accounts that you all are currently verifying and receiving information from?
We are. We've, as I mentioned, we've issued a bunch of legal process, and we're still awaiting returns from a number of the companies, to include other social media companies as well.
Okay. Well, my time has expired. Thank you for your patience today. Thank you for the information. We look forward to getting more information. And Director Rowe, we are going to hold you to being a change agent because things at the Secret Service absolutely have to change. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, and I want to thank our witnesses for your testimony here today. Certainly what happened on July 13th could and should have been prevented from what I have heard today. I'm certainly grateful to our witnesses for their candid answers and for helping to provide additional clarity and new information about the circumstances surrounding this attack. Acting Director Rowe, some of what you have said today conflicts with information and accounts that we have received from local law enforcement that we've had the opportunity to talk with. They have been voluntarily and I will say expeditiously cooperating with our bipartisan investigation, which we certainly appreciate. But we now need to speak with Secret Service agents directly, who are directly involved. And I would say that you need to make them available as soon as possible. Those interviews can't start weeks from now or months from now. Time is of the essence when memories are fresh and you can get the information that is most important to us. So my question for you as we wrap up this hearing, Acting Director Rowe, will you commit to having those agents available for this committee to interview as soon as possible in a matter of days, not weeks, matter of days?
Yes, sir.
Great, thank you. Certainly the American people deserve to know what went wrong and they deserve accountability for those security failures. And as we continue our bipartisan investigation into security failures that day and any underlying systemic issues, we'll continue working to follow the facts, get clear answers, and make important recommendations to ensure that a security failure like this never happens again. The hearing record will remain open for 15 days until 5 p.m. on August 14th, 2024. For the submission of statements and for the questions for the record, this hearing is now adjourned.